some sort of weapon.
Some electric cable was utilized to brutalize the young woman, we believe. She found, of course, the young woman with her 2 boys in Sandton, and of course, like every mother would do, beat up the woman.
Well, there's a lot of report back in Zimbabwe about the hell-raising ways of these two, of these two young men. We've seen them being kicked out of apartments and the like and so forth. So it seems to be a problem that the Mugabe family is facing. We're asking you that question. We also want you guys to tweet us. Let's have a look at those tweets, Kendall.
Well, the first one from Mfundo, he says, if he was frail, he would have been not in power now. He may be old, but people still scared and respect Mugabe.
Well, he's talking about the husband, right?
Yeah,
maybe he's talking about why she's not being arrested.
Yeah. Michael Big M says, yes, we are a country governed by law, but let's be honest, that won't happen because of the diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, interesting one. Michael, keep it coming. Keep tweeting us. Overwhelming majority say yes, the law should take its course. Let's see how that story develops over the next day or so. It'll be very interesting. But of course, Team South Africa are on their way back from the World Champs. It's been the most successful one to date. We got a wonderful picture that really shows us what our world beat has done.
Yeah, that's what they look like. That's what our medalists look like. Caster Semenya, Luvo Manyonga, Roosevelt Samai, and Wade van die Kerk. Our 6 medals, well, not 6, more like 9 medals that we got at the IWF World Championships. Phenomenal performance by these young athletes. And we want to find out from you, what's our question on this?
What are your hopes for the future? Because the future looks bright. We topped the medals table at the Junior World Champs, so the outlook is really, really bright. We've got a golden generation coming through, Elvis.
That golden generation can assist us really to get to the top of that medal hole, and we can see them now already in action. So let's find out from you. Anuke says, Wade Dreamer, very bright. The hope for the entire African continent is very bright, because that's correct, eh? There's some very good talent on the continent.
Yeah, Katleho says, South Africa has lots of talent awaiting. A few years from now, we'll see surprises as more athletes emerge and represent us globally.
Katleho, we will have to manage them properly, and we will have to give them opportunities to excel at international level. In order for that to happen, guys, we have to invest in them.
And sponsor them properly, Evan.
Absolutely.
Invest in them. That's what it's going to take. Invest in them. Keep tweeting us. Keep telling us what you think. Let's get into our work now with the headlines.
Officials from Mpumalanga Department of Education are expected to visit the school in Bushbuck Ridge, where a 30-year-old female teacher was allegedly gunned down by a husband in front of learners and staff. Gauteng Community Safety MEC Zizakela Nkosi Molobani has instructed law enforcement agencies in Gauteng to investigate the assault case of Zimbabwe's First Lady Grace Mugabe. And rescue teams in Sierra Leone are searching for hundreds of people missing after a mudslide killed more than 300 on the outskirts of the capital. Those are your headlines, but before we get there, let's first find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Gentlemen, hearty good morning to the both of you. This weekend is going to be massive. Got lots happening. We're looking ahead to the Springbok Rugby Championships, but besides that, we'll also be talking a little bit about our Team SA. This is what we've got for you today.
France complained of neck pain on Thursday. Over the weekend, started radiating down his arm, so we are concerned for a disc injury.
Ahead of the Springboks Rugby Championship open against hard-scrumming nation Argentina, the team loses Frans Malherbe for the entire tournament.
Another medal for South Africa. He is really, really enjoying himself there.
Hope springs eternal for South Africa's future in athletics as we look back at what has been Team SA's best ever performance at the IWF World Championships.
But nobody can stop the world record holder.
And South African Jody Smith has moved to the top of the world surfing rankings after a career-best third-place finish in the Billabong Pro Tahiti.
No better place to be than in the front, eh?
True that, Jody Smith. As you know, in South Africa, we love a winner. No better place to be than in the front. Well, now it's back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Surf's up, bro. Well, there you have it. Top story this hour, though. Officials from the Mpumalanga Department of Education are expected to visit the school in Bushbuck Ridge, where a 30-year-old female teacher was allegedly gunned down by her husband in front of learners and staff. Spokesperson for the department, Jasper Zwani, confirmed that Kate Chuluwani, a teacher at SADC Primary School, died after she was shot in full view of a class of grade 2 learners yesterday. The police also confirmed that her husband later shot and killed himself at their home. Zwani says all the affected will receive counselling. Now we'll see if we can get hold of our reporter very urgently there in that area to give us an update on that story, so you have to stay tuned for more a little bit later. Former AU Commission Chairperson Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma has come out in support of Woman Smith. Speaking to the SABC earlier, the former minister called on action to be taken against Deputy Higher Education Minister Mduduzi Manana. The Deputy Minister, as you can recall, assaulted 2 women at a Johannesburg nightclub recently.
In his case, it's different because he has even admitted. So, because normally you would say the law must take its course and so on, but he has admitted. So I think it's fair to act on it because we've seen, and he has said he has done it.
So you would wait in the same position for the law to take its course?
No, I'm saying you should act on it because he has admitted. Yeah. Because if you act when he hasn't admitted, then they will say you are judging. Yes. So I'm just saying in his case, I think it's different because he has admitted. Yeah. So you can act on it.
You remove him from the position?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gauteng Community Safety MEC Sizakele Nkosi Molobani has instructed law enforcement agencies in Gauteng to investigate the assault case of Zimbabwe's First Lady Grace Mugabe and ensure that justice is served. This after allegations surfaced by a young South African woman that Grace Mugabe assaulted her at a Sandton hotel. It's understood that Mugabe attacked the woman after finding her with her 2 sons. The woman suffered head injuries and bruises on her upper body. A case of assault has since been opened with the police. The Democratic Alliance leader Mmusi Maimane is expected to visit Marikana this morning. Maimane is expected to lay wreaths at the infamous Wonderkop Koppie, the scene of the shooting of 34 mine workers by the police in 2012. Now, 5 years on, the platinum-endowed area remains a land of poverty and squalor.
Marikana, a land of contrasts, a land of irony. Endowed with a treasure chest of precious metals, its inhabitants live in abject squalor. Most Marikana residents are migrants. 53-year-old Mtoteni Hlati is one of them. He has been a rock drill operator at Lonmin for 28 years. He says they struggle a lot living in these shacks. They are at risk of getting burnt, and his wife got burnt. They work at the mine because they have no choice. They earn very little money, and it's not enough for them to educate their children back home and for them to survive here. Lonmin mine workers need decent housing. The 700 million rand Lonmin housing project is insufficient. It is being occupied illegally by local residents who are refusing to leave. Lonmin is promising more funding for low-cost housing.
By end of 2018, we committed to spend R500 million despite the financial situation of the company. We are doing that right now, building about 300, 400 units every year. I wish we could double the pace, but financially we just can't do more.
Rental housing units are unaffordable for most mine workers. They only receive 2,200 rand for a living out allowance. He says here at least he knows that he lives in a shack and there's water, and he doesn't have to pay for it because the landlord makes a plan and they pay the landlord. Meanwhile, the union AMCU is critical of Lonmin's housing provision.
The question will be, after they've extracted these minerals, they have to return back home. Would they have they will be in a position to enjoy the same accommodation where they come from? That's the main question.
Wednesday marks the 5th anniversary of the Marikana massacre, during which 34 mine workers were shot and killed by the police. Sintle Englihihi, SABC News, Marikana.
A historian testifying in the case that seeks to legalize dacha in the High Court in Pretoria says that laws on the substance were formulated on racial bias. Craig Patterson's testimony follows that of the British drug expert Professor David Nutt, who earlier testified that cannabis was intrinsically less harmful than any other drug. The case continues today.
Speaking in one voice against the legalization of dacha, these protesters say it will have detrimental effects should it be legalized.
We are saying no to marijuana. We cannot make marijuana to be legal here in South Africa.
That's where our young people start from. In dacha, they start small with dacha and then they continue adding some other drugs.
The case has been brought to court by a Johannesburg couple who believes it can be used to cure chronic illnesses such as cancer. Experts are also in court to throw their weight behind their case.
South Africa, prior to apartheid and during apartheid obviously, was a racist state. It was a racist society, and that the laws passed by that racist state and racist society were racist as well. So what I really argue is that the laws against cannabis came as much from a racial foundation and colonial thinking as the apartheid laws did.
Patterson says the use of dacha started increasing in the 70s. The trial continues. Mulimo Waonemotwa, SABC News, Pretoria.
Further afield on the continent, in Sierra Leone, heavy flooding and mudslides have left 312 people dead in the capital of Freetown. The disaster has also left more than 2,000 people homeless. Excavators have been working non-stop to pull bodies from the rubble. The disaster has overwhelmed the city's morgues. President Ernest Bayo Koroma said in an address to the nation that an emergency response center had been established at Regent, the worst affected area. Now, he appealed for unity from a nation still struggling from the legacy of Ebola and a long civil war. The Sierra Leone Meteorological Department says that they did not issue any warning ahead of the torrential rains to hasten evacuation from the disaster zones. Now, rescue teams continue to search for hundreds of people believed to be missing. A Red Cross official says that the death toll is expected to rise and more bodies are recovered. Now, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has urged the opposition to avoid violent protests and take grievances that they have over the presidential election results to court. Meanwhile, calm has returned to most parts of the country that witnessed sporadic protest after the presidential elections were announced.
In Kibera, John Odongo gets down to business. It's his first day of operation since Tuesday last week when Kenya went to the polls. His pockets are empty, he tells us, and if he does not open his shop today, soon his belly will also be empty.
I'm here because I'm hungry, but still I'm afraid of the demonstrators.
He is among the very few business operators brave enough to resume operations here in Kibera, where sporadic protests have paralyzed business. A few meters from here, a group of women hold a vigil in memory of those who have died in violent protests following the announcement of the poll results. At the office of the President Uhuru Kenyatta reported to duty. He made his first public appearance since he was declared winner of this year's elections, urging the police not to use excessive force on demonstrators.
But we continue to encourage them to use restraint as they exercise their duties.
And to his competitors,
to our friends who have yet to accept the outcome, we continue to appeal to them that we have extended our arm and a hand of peace and a hand of friendship, and for them to use whatever legal mechanisms that have been created by our wonderful Constitution.
Life was back to normal in the central business district. It was clear majority of Kenyans had largely ignored former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's calls to boycott work. Odinga has said that he will announce his next move on Tuesday, but time is fast running out for him. If the opposition does not file a petition by Friday this week, Kenyatta will be sworn in for his second and last term on August the 29th. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
Zimbabwean Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa is recovering in a Johannesburg hospital where he was admitted over the weekend after falling ill at the ZANU-PF rally. Mnangagwa was airlifted from Zimbabwe to the Wits Donald Gordon Medical Center here in Parktown. He allegedly suffered food poisoning.
Zimbabwean Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa has been recuperating at this Johannesburg hospital since being admitted at the weekend. He was airlifted to the facility after falling ill at a party rally in Gwanda on Saturday. Speaking at a rally at Heroes Acre in Harare, President Mugabe confirmed his first vice president was being treated in South Africa.
Vice President Comrade Emmerson Mnangagwa is not back yet from hospital in Johannesburg.
But information on his condition is sketchy.
The Vice President state, he's well. He's much better. He's almost jovial. Yeah, he's well.
What went wrong?
Well, he had a severe gastroenteritis, severe vomiting with diarrhea, and became dehydrated.
Mnangagwa is seen as one of the front-runners, along with First Lady Grace Mugabe, in Zimbabwe's presidential succession race ahead of the 2018 presidential vote. This has led to tension in the ruling party. Hospital officials were not readily available for comment, but SABC News understands that Emmerson Mnangagwa is in a stable condition in a general ward. Dumala Mutlaudi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, that's the Vice President here in South Africa. But what about the First Lady? That's why we're asking you a question on our poll today. We want to check with you. If you put up the poll there, let's take a look at the numbers, because we ask you, should the First Lady be arrested? That's Grace Mugabe, for assault here in South Africa. So far, 129 votes in 92. That's the majority of you here in South Africa and on the African continent are suggesting that the First Lady Grace Mugabe of Zimbabwe should be arrested for assault in South Africa. We'll take a look at some of those comments a little bit later. But on our question of the day, we're asking you, why have our schools become like war zones? It's a very important question, because there's a lot of violence on our schools currently. On the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. Even a lot of feedback that we're getting from our viewers on this particular topic.
Yeah, it's difficult, obviously. You know, we're in a sad state in our schools. In the latest incident, it kind of links with violence in schools, but also links with gender violence, and we're smack bang in the middle of Women's Month, and it's been a rather deadly Women's Month. This latest incident, of course, we saw that a teacher was shot by her husband in front of school children in the classroom just yesterday, and then he later took his own life in this instance. And South Africa is suffering incredibly high levels of not just gender violence, but violence at our schools. Our focus today, of course, is on violence in schools in South Africa. But let's just take a look at some of the tweets that people are sending in with regards to that question.
This one coming from Jamila van der Skype says, the reason here is racism. South Africans of all race still have hatred in their hearts that they now are pushing it onto their children.
I am Mojana tells us, let's not take this lightly. All this is the works of the devil.
Taking it to another dimension there, that's I am. Those are some of your tweets. Please keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue here during the course of the program, so please keep them coming. But we've got other issues to deal with, so let's continue that discussion with Eben.
So, moving on to this, what prompted this discussion is that the KwaZulu-Natal Education Department, they, of course, they've expressed their satisfaction with the way that the courts dealing with the case involving the 19-year-old learner who brutally assaulted a 16-year-old girl on the school premises. If you remember, this incident took place at the Sia Tutuka Secondary School. Now, it happened a year ago, but he was only arrested this week after his father took him in. The Ntuzuma Magistrates Court north of Durban granted Lindukutle Dube bail of 1,500 rand during his first court appearance. That was yesterday.
An assault which went viral on social media. In the video, the accused repeatedly hits and kicks a 16-year-old schoolgirl on the school's premises. The accused and the victim were both pupils at SADTU Secondary School in Inanda at the time. It happened in November last year. The two pupils are currently attending other schools. The Department of Education intervened after the video went viral last week. It opened a case of assault against the teenager. Officials said there were gaps in the school's handling of the matter. The parents of the victim also raised concerns over how the school dealt with the matter. The teenager handed himself over to the police on Friday. The prosecution said the accused would likely face an additional charge.
Our being here at court, it has given us some more details as to how we're going to go about looking into our own internal investigation, because we are starting our own internal investigation as to what happened, when what happened, what was done, and what was not done.
The department says it will embark on an awareness program in schools. The matter was postponed until the 14th of September. Simpiwe Makanya, SABC News, Ntuzuma.
Now, a little bit later, we'll speak to the Teachers Union. We'll also speak to, well, experts around violence and other issues facing young people. But first, let's just have a look on social media. What's happening on, what are the top trends? No doubt, the top trend right now, the hashtag is Grace Mugabe. Yes, the First Lady of Zimbabwe. She's in South Africa. However, she may be facing the might of the law after allegedly assaulting a 20-year-old female model by hitting her with an extension cord at a hotel in Sandton. Here you see the horrific injuries that was suffered by this young woman. Of course, we're asking you on our poll today, should Grace Mugabe be arrested for this alleged assault? It is at the moment. Moving on, a teacher at Bushbuck Ridge, that's our top story, was shot dead in full view of her pupils by her husband. The learners are receiving counseling now after the incident in Mpumalanga. The hashtag is school shooting if you want to follow up on it. Now, it's been 5 years since the violent clash between minors and police that took place at the Wonderkop at Marikana. People are reminded of this sad event and are pointing out that no accountability yet. The hashtag there is Marikana. There's an iconic picture of that fateful day. Then, international comedian and South African superstar Trevor Noah, as well as our other world celebrity, Charlize Theron. These homegrown talents made a guest appearance at the Oaklands High School yesterday to be part of a youth development program there in the Western Cape. Hashtag is Oaklands. What a nice picture. And what a thrill for the kids. Then, more than 300 people are believed to have died in a mudslide and flooding near Sierra Leone's capital of Freetown. The number now stands at 312, with some of these incredible pictures doing the rounds on social media. Hashtag Sierra Leone if you want to interact with it or even have a look at some of these sorts of images. Look at this, a building simply tumbling into the torrent. We can tell you, of course, that the death toll there is expected to rise. Now, the picture of the day comes from Jono, who calls himself the sick individual, and points out this picture of the mudslide when it was at its highest point there. He said, "I'm actually lost for words. I'm hurt and heartbroken. My condolences to those who lost anyone to this tragic situation today. Pray for Sierra Leone," he says, and I think it's a sentiment. That is not water. That is mud, mostly mud that's standing, well, almost to the roofs of the first floor of some buildings in Freetown. Now for our comment of the day. This one comes from Vresta Sizwe Nkwekazi, who says, Arthur Mafokate, Max Maponyane, Mduduzi Manana, Shaka Sisulu. Beating women up just makes one wonder how many women are suffering in silence. That is a question that we all in South Africa have to answer as we deal with the fallout of gender violence in this month of August, also known as Women's Month here. Now, let's go to the courts quickly. We'll have a look at what's happening in Johannesburg, where 5 men arrested in connection with the gruesome murder and house robbery of a Northcliffe family. They are expected to appear in the Magistrates Court in Johannesburg. The men are facing charge of kidnapping, robbery and the murder of Greg Melanie and Raquel Naidu in June of this year. Their burnt bodies were later found in Centurion. Now, 6 men were arrested initially in connection with the case, but charges were withdrawn against one due to a lack of evidence. Still in Joburg, the former SABC COO, Mr. Claudi Mutsuneng, as well as former News Group executive Simon Tabele, they are expected to appear in the Labour Court. Now, the two must explain why they must not be held personally liable for the legal cost in the case of the so-called SABC 8. This relates to their role in the unlawful dismissal of senior SABC journalists for speaking out against the broadcaster's decision not to show footage of violent protests last year. Then in Bloemfontein, a full bench of the Supreme Court of Appeal will hear the matter involving Thandi Makubela, who was convicted, of course, of the murder of her husband, acting judge of the Western Cape High Court. Patrick Makubela was sentenced to an effective 18 years in prison 2 years ago. Now she's pinning her hopes on the Supreme Court of Appeal to overturn her conviction. These are the cases before the court. They will be updated on this channel a little bit later. Keep an eye out for it. Just to point out for you what we're doing tomorrow, of course, we're talking about violence in schools today, and tomorrow we'll be discussing gender violence. But today the two seem to be intrinsically linked after a husband went to a school with a weapon and shot his partner in front of school children. It's a kind of violence that seems to be becoming more and more the norm here in South Africa. What do you think? Tell us what you think. Are our schools becoming war zones? That's our question of the day to you. Of course, tomorrow we'll deal a little bit further with gender violence and we'll talk about the gender violence app that was launched today. But we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.
Today on Rights and Recourse, we will unpack the new traditional court bill.
The idea of the bill is not to over-regulate, to basically set the principles.
The most important aspect of this bill is that it understands that customary law by its nature is consensual, that I have a right to affiliate, I have a right therefore to opt in, and I have a right to opt out.
The opt-out provision is basically one that you've got to respect the court in the sense of if you've been summoned, you've got to tell the clerk of the court at least that you're not willing to attend.
The challenge that I would like to throw to the Department of Justice, it has to come up with mechanisms of ensuring that people who exercise their right to opt out or to opt in are not in any way victimized.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Mates on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
Shortly we'll be talking about violence in our schools, but President Jacob Zuma will today preside over the launch of the African Regional Centre of the new Development Bank. Now, the President will be joined by the President of this Development Bank, Kundapar Vaman Kamat, the Cabinet Ministers as well as other banking executives. In July of 2014, BRICS countries signed the agreement to establish the new Development Bank and at the 6th BRICS Summit that took place in Brazil. The NDB headquarters were officially opened in Shanghai, China in February of 2016. Let's go to this event live.
By another politician who shall remain nameless, that ideas become a material force when they have gripped the masses. But who am I to imagine that governors of central banks, no less, can be spoken about in the same vein as the masses? But if I may proceed, as I cast about trying to figure out just what to say to such a distinguished gathering, I decided to read up a little on the subject of integration. And I stumbled on something that was written, or perhaps rather spoken, in May 1963 in Addis Ababa. And with your kind permission, Your Excellencies, and perhaps at the risk of trespassing on your patience, I'd like to quote excerpts from that statement. Quote, "It has not taken us long to discover that the struggle against colonialism does not end with the attainment of national independence. Independence is only a prelude to a new and more involved struggle for the right to conduct our economic and social affairs, to construct our society according to our aspirations, unhampered by crushing and humiliating external control and influence. The social and economic development of Africa will come only within the political kingdom, not the other way around. We cannot ignore the teachings of history. Our continent is probably the richest in the world for minerals and agricultural primary materials. From the Congo alone, Western firms exported copper, rubber, and other goods to the tune of over $3,000 million in the 10 years between 1945 and 1955. And from South Africa, Western gold mining companies have drawn a profit in the 6 years between 1947 to 1951 of $814 million. We need unified economic planning for Africa. Independent financing and independent development cannot take place without an independent currency. A currency system that is backed by the resources of a foreign state is ipso facto subject to trade and financial arrangements of that foreign country. The first step towards our cohesive economy will be a unified monetary zone with initially an agreed common parity for our currencies. Common continental planning for the industrial and agricultural development is a vital necessity. Your Excellencies, no medals will be given for recognizing that voice in the wilderness, which was Kwame Nkrumah in May 1963 at the formation of the OAU in Addis Ababa. That was a whole 50 years or more ago. He called for a commission to frame a constitution for a union of African states. Well, we have a Constitution Act now. He also called for a commission to work out a continent-wide plan for a unified or common economic and industrial program for Africa. We now have Agenda 2063, which was carved out under the distinguished leadership of my sister, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. He called for a common market for Africa, and he also called for an African currency, an African monetary zone, and an African central bank. Honorable Gouverneur, Mesdames et Messieurs, la Commission de l'Union africaine a toujours accordé et continuera toujours d'accorder une grande importance à vos travaux qui, au-delà de vos échanges sur vos missions et objectifs traditionnels de lutte contre l'inflation et pour garantir la stabilité économique et financière, offre un cadre privilégié d'échange, d'analyse des questions liées à l'intégration économique et monétaire sur le continent. Une illustration, si besoin en était, de votre intérêt aux questions d'intégration est le thème de votre symposium de cette année, dont le thème et perspective d'intégration monétaire en Afrique leçons tirées de l'expérience d'intégration monétaire et financière européenne. Your Excellencies, we are here today to deal with these questions which are of primary importance to us in Africa. We have already identified what we as Africans want in our Agenda 2063, subsumed under 7 aspirations. 1, a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. 2, an integrated continent, politically united and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's Renaissance. 3, an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. 4, a peaceful and secure Africa. 5, an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. 6, an Africa where development is people-driven, unleashing the potential of its women and youth, and serving Africa as a strong, united, integrated global player and partner. So, Your Excellencies, our task this week is well cut out for us, and we are indeed privileged to be here once again in this beautiful rainbow country, source of so much inspiration for all of us. I'd like to thank you for your kind and polite attention. Thank you.
Excellency, Deputy Chairperson of African Union Commission, Mr. Kwesi Koti, for giving us food for thought. Without any further waste of time, I would like to inform you that we have the Chairperson of the AACB, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, who is also Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Allow me to ask him to come and address us. Governor.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Jacob Zuma, the Governor, and the Deputy Chair of the Association of African Central Bank, the representative of African Union, the governors, and representatives of African Central and Reserve Banks, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored and privileged to give the opening address at this Governors Symposium of the Association of African Central Banks, AACB, for the year 2017. At the outset, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to His Excellency, the President Jacob Zuma of the Republic of South Africa, the government, and the people of South Africa for agreeing to host this very important symposium and for the warm welcome accorded to delegates at these annual meetings. I also wish to welcome my colleagues.
Well, we have to cut away from that broadcast. I just want to inform you that President Jacob Zuma will be delivering the keynote address there shortly. When he does, we'll go back there live. But the big story today, of course, is what's happening at a school in Mpumalanga. Officials from the Mpumalanga Department of Education, they're expected to visit the school in Bushbuck Ridge, where a 30-year-old female teacher was allegedly gunned down by her husband in front of learners and staff yesterday. Spokesperson for the department, Jasper Zwane, confirmed that Kate Chilwane, a teacher at the Sidiba Satuto Primary School, died after she was shot in full view of her class of grade 2 learners yesterday. The police also confirmed that her husband later shot and killed himself at their home. Now, all affected learners and staff members are receiving counselling as we speak. But for the latest, let's go to our reporter, Mweli Masilela. He's at the SADC Primary School in Bushbuck Ridge. Very good morning to you, Mweli. Thanks for being with us. Just give us a quick overview. What's happening there?
Good morning to you and the viewers. Yes, we are coming to you live from the SADC Primary School here in Bushbuck Ridge. This is where the unfortunate incident happened, where a 30-year-old teacher was shot or gunned down by her husband. But to tell us more about this, I'm joined by the spokesperson of the police here in Mpumalanga, Brigadier Leonard Tlati. Brigadier, if you can tell us, what information do you have about this incident?
Yeah, good morning to the listeners. What we have gathered is that yesterday a female teacher was fatally shot at this particular school. Whilst we're still shattered about that, we then also received news that the alleged person, or the person who's alleged to have shot the teacher, also committed suicide. Then subsequent to that, we then opened a docket of murder and that of an inquest for us then to accumulate evidence that at the end of the day we'll then be able to present before the court for a decision to be taken.
Do you perhaps have reasons for this motive?
Currently, we do not have motive or motives regarding this happening. But then, during the course of us now continuing with our investigations, I'm sure that we'll be able to pick up as to what led to this, unfortunate incident.
Any maybe information you're getting from community members, or what more can you get from this?
Currently, I cannot divulge anything because it's part of everything that we're getting from community members forms part of our investigation. So it will not be feasible for me to divulge that information. We'll accumulate it and put it before the court for a decision, a proper decision to be taken. Let me also indicate that two issues can happen here. The prosecutor can decide to close these cases in due course, or a formal inquest can be held before the court. So we need to be careful when we tread upon this issue. We have to gather all evidence carefully and present this evidence before the court.
Is this something that has happened before from the police side, from the police perspective? Is it happening for the first time in the province?
Yeah, that, at the school, that somebody is being shot, a teacher, for that matter, being shot by the husband. It's the first time that we have experienced these things. But I must indicate that about 3 weeks back, we have got a female cop in Kwaggafontein, which was shot by, an alleged boyfriend, and him also committed suicide. These are issues that are happening in our communities, but that in a school is the first time.
Well, that is the spokesperson of the police here in Mpumalanga, Brigadier Leonard Tlati. I'll now bring in the spokesperson of the Department of Education here in the province, that is Jasper Zwane. Mr. Zwane, if you can tell us what is going to happen now going forward after this incident?
Yeah, we can indicate that we are devastated as the Department of Education in Mpumalanga following the incident that took place yesterday. We want to send our profound condolences to the bereaved family, and as we speak, our officials are at the school. They are counseling all the learners, including the teachers. Indeed, they are highly traumatized following what has happened. It is the first time that we experience an incident of this nature in the province, and we want to condemn it in strongest term possible. It should not happen. We will learn from this as to how best can we ensure and pray that an incident of this nature does not happen in our province. The MEC for Education, Mrs. Regina Mhaule, has already conveyed her condolences and condemned the incident that is happening. We are going to continue to support the school and the teachers and everyone that is affected by this bereavement. At 11 o'clock, we are going to meet the bereaved family such that we can pay our homage and to see the extent to which we can assist them.
We understand yesterday classes were suspended. How is the situation today? Are learners continuing with the day-to-day duties?
Yeah, classes were suspended yesterday. As we speak, learners are in class. The classes are continuing, but like I said, we're also providing counseling services. Our team is going to be here until such time that we are satisfied that everyone is able to come to terms with this unfortunate reality.
The team that is on the ground, of course, there are psychologists involved on the ground. What is their view about the whole situation? How are the learners coping with the situation?
No, from the look of things, the learners are coping, but we may not say they are coping well. We are going to get a full report from the team. But not only do we have our psychologists, we also have, pastors in our midst. In early hours of the morning, we had an assembly where pastors prayed, and the reaction of the learners, including the teachers, was such that they are at easy now that the pastors are here, now that the officials of the department are here. So we are optimistic that we are going to manage this process going forward.
Well, that is the spokesperson for the Department of Education, Mr. Charles Pazwana, giving us a briefing of what is going to happen after this incident going forward, saying that they will be going to visit families of the affected families. It's back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Mweli Masilela, giving us an update there at the school in Mpumalanga where this murder took place in the last 24 hours. Kate Chilwane was killed by her husband in front of a grade 2 class there. It's a shocking incident of violence at our schools, only the latest one in a whole series of incidents that seem to be escalating. And the sad part is it doesn't even make the news, incidents of violence at schools anymore. So we're asking you the question, why have our schools become like war zones? Let's have a look at what you guys are telling us. This is the question here on screen. Tweet us what you think. It'd be interesting to see what your experiences are at schools. Do we have enough security on our schools? I don't know. Do we need security on our schools? Yes, I think so. Philander tells us, I'm sure it didn't start now. I put the blame fully on the principal. If you look at this bully case, it's the fault of the head of the school. Of course, this refers to the incident in KwaZulu-Natal where a 16-year-old learner was brutally beaten by a 19-year-old at school. Should 19-year-olds even still be at school, I ask? Rich dads, poor kids tell us what happens in the ghetto will surely happen at schools. Lincoln Bernardo tells us schools do not function in a vacuum. They're a direct reflection of wider society where it could reasonably be said we have a war socio-economic situation developing. Our townships are war zones, is what Lincoln Bernardo is telling us. And if you look at some places in the Western Cape and elsewhere, that certainly is the case. Children walking around with weapons to protect themselves from gangsters and the like in our schools. What do we do? What do you think we need to do? We can't build higher fences. Are our fences that are there now good enough? Do we need security with weapons on the schools? How do we come to terms with this issue? Well, we'll talk about this and others in the next hour. But right now, of course, it's time for us to shift our focus a little bit to sport. And of course, our athletics team have done an incredible job, Kendall. Yes, almost the unthinkable to finish in 3rd place on the world medals table standings.
Phenomenal stuff. 6 medals won by 4 of our athletes, Caster Semenya, Wade Funike, Luva Manyonga, Rushwa Samai. And you know what? We did better than Great Britain, the host themselves, who spent £27 million they've invested until 2020. And you know what? Their showing is much lower than ours. Fantastic stuff by these athletes.
Yeah, some would say despite the way that we support our athletes, they are excelling. We've got a golden generation of young athletes coming through as well. These are the seniors, but our juniors have also topped the medal standing at the World Junior Athletics in Kenya.
Yes, they did. And you know what? It just speaks to where we're going as a nation. That despite maybe administrative issues, despite lack of support, we have the athletes, and it's just about giving them an opportunity. Just a quick one, just to remind you of where we stand on that medals table out in London. We've got something just to show you about how well South Africa has done. 1, 2, 3. That's where South Africa sits. And that's the number of gold medals. We've got 3, 1 silver, 2 bronzes. It's really phenomenal. Look where Great Britain is sitting. On 2 golds, 3 silvers, and a bronze. And you know what, Eben, the reason I bring that up is because it's not just about money. £27 million is no child's play. It's about how you use it, and it's about having the talent. South Africa clearly has the talent.
Can we call them not so Great Britain after the criticism of Caster Semenya?
I like that moniker. Yes, not so Great Britain, coming in way below South Africa on the London medals table.
There you go. And they were the ones abusing Caster Semenya. through official channels, so much so that Sir Sebastian Coe is going to take the hydroandrogenism document to the World Athletics. They now want to govern the performances of Caster Semenya. It's a shocker. Yeah, absolute shocker. But our athletes certainly show the world that, well, talent and dedication can do it.
You cannot hold it back. If it's there, you can't hold a good man or a good woman down. If they've been given a talent, they will use it. You give them the opportunity, and here they are. South Africa, look. This is what South Africa has always been waiting to do, to become as good as it is and to get even better going into the future.
Anyhow, Kendall, I have to cut you. I know that you're frothing at the mouth here about South Africa's super athletes. But we've got a bit of developing news. President Jacob Zuma has just taken to the podium at the launch of the NDB. Let's go there live.
Of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, AACB Vice Chairperson, representative of the African Union Commission Chairperson, heads of central banks, representatives from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, senior officials from the banking and related sectors, academics, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and pleasure to welcome you to South Africa. You have assembled here to hold the 40th annual meeting of the AACB. This is indeed a major milestone for this organization. It is a time to reflect, take stock of achievements, and consider the next steps on the path to promoting economic development in our continent. The last time the Association of African Central Banks hosted its meetings in South Africa was on the 16th August 2001. Less than a month later, the 9/11 tragedy occurred, which negatively affected confidence levels, financial market developments, and growth prospects across the world, Africa included. This gathering occurs at the time when the global economy is still trying to shake off some of the negative legacies of the global financial crisis. In 2008, the world faced the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. International financial markets went into turmoil, and many countries encountered deep economic recessions. The international community has since endeavored to put measures in place to restore sustainable global growth and strengthen the international financial system by reforming international financial regulations. While evidence suggests that much has been achieved to date through coordination and cooperation, vigilance is still needed to ensure that the growth momentum is maintained and financial markets are resilient. African economies are integrated into the global economy, and as such, we are forced to bear the brunt of adverse international economic developments. This meeting provides an excellent opportunity for the exchange of ideas around the role that central banks can play to address deficiencies and constraints so as to enhance growth in the different African regions. The association has come a long way since its establishment on the 25th May 1963 at the Summit Conference of African Heads of State and Government in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The founding principle of this organization is to further the integration process in Africa. Integration has many objectives spanning across the political, social, and economic spheres. The Abuja Treaty that was signed in 2004 committed member states on the continent to harmonize their economic, monetary, financial, and payments policies in support of economic integration on the continent. The different regions on the continent have continued to pursue these goals. While the progress to date has not been in line with expectations, we remain committed to the aspirations as set out in the Abuja Treaty. I would like to encourage you to give more focused attention to the role that central banks and monetary policy could play in our pursuit of the goals as set out in the treaty. Central banks have an important role to play in promoting intercontinental trade, linking the payment systems across the continent, developing a well-functioning and efficient banking system, promoting cross-border banking and capital flows. Apart from involving integration, these objectives also underpin sustainable and inclusive economic development and will contribute to the eradication of poverty on the continent. In 2013, the African Union adopted Agenda 2063, which strongly promotes economic integration across the continent. Agenda 2063 is premised on the view that a prosperous Africa is based on inclusive growth, sustainable development, good governance, and a strong focus on regional integration. By reducing fragmentation and spatial exclusion, Africa can realize its substantive potential for sustainable and inclusive growth. Integration into the continental and global trade and economic networks is crucial for the development of our continent. However, the recent move towards more protectionist policies by some developed countries could have implications on the pace of globalization going forward. According to the African Development Bank, intracontinental trade increased from approximately 10% in 2000 to around 15% of total African trade in 2016. While this improvement is to be commended, this is still very low by international standards. African countries need to diversify their relations by expanding their economic and trade links with other countries on the continent. There is little doubt that expanding trade among African countries can provide a strong foundation for sustainable economic development on the continent. Fortunately, the African leaders have discussed the matter of integration in the continent, of connecting the countries, and have begun the process of building the infrastructure to facilitate that. They are also discussing softening the borders for easy flow of people and goods. In fact, some regions are in the process of integration. It is for this reason that the heads of state and government of the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, East African Community, and South African Development Community, SADC, launched the tripartite free trade area in 2015. An efficient payment system that flows for timely and cost-effective cross-border payments has a critical role to play in promoting regional trade. A well-functioning payment system is also crucial for the transfer of migrant remittance, which has become a major source of external finance for Africa. During 2016, remittance flows accounted for over half of total private flows in Africa. We count on the central banks to assist with the development of the payment systems across the continent that would assist in this regard. It is now generally accepted that growth will not be sustainable if it is not inclusive. Financial inclusion is an important pillar of inclusive growth. the cutting-edge innovations on the continent in financial services and mobile payments in particular have gone a long way in promoting financial inclusion in Africa. The role that central banks can play in ensuring that the financial system adequately caters for financing for SME development is also crucial in promoting financial inclusion and development of the continent. Monetary policy has an important role to play in the development of our economies and the continent in general. It is generally accepted that a stable macroeconomic environment is essential for economic growth. Maintaining price and financial stability are two of the key characteristics in this regard. I do not need to remind this audience about the role that central banks should play in promoting price and financial stability. There are a number of other challenges that need to be overcome in pursuing the objective of economic integration on the continent. Economic convergence strengthens economic integration. The effort of countries and regions across the continent directed at meeting the convergence criteria has been below expectations. International developments have adversely influenced the socio-macroeconomic outcomes in the country, in the countries. However, there is little doubt that a redoubling of efforts on our part is also required to put our growth and inflation trajectory back on track, as well as alleviating budget deficits and other structural constraints in our countries. We must also learn from other regions in our pursuit of integration or integrating the continent. Europe can provide some useful lessons in this regard, and this is something you have catered for in your symposium program. We need to also consider the experiences of other regions like Asia and Latin America, among others. South Africa remains committed to the development of the region and the continent. I'm very pleased to note that the South African Reserve Bank will assume the presidency of the association in the next year. I'm sure that the bank will, in collaboration with the other central banks on the continent, drive some concrete initiatives in support of Agenda 2063 during its presidency. South Africa will also assume the chair of the SADC this month. we will ensure that the projects to be pursued in SADC are closely aligned with those of the African Union. Furthermore, South Africa will also chair the BRICS Forum next year. The BRICS Africa Regional Center of the new Development Bank will be opening its doors in Johannesburg next month. It is envisaged that this office will contribute to accessing the much-needed resources to pursue our developmental goals on the continent. Finally, as the only African country in the G20, South Africa remains committed to ensuring that African interests are well represented in international deliberations and agreements. The G20 has launched the African Partnership Initiative, which is meant to provide international support for the African Union's Agenda 2063. We should actively participate in this and the other such initiatives which could assist in driving the developmental agenda on the continent. I encourage you to inform your South African counterparts of any issue of interest to Africa that warrants special attention in the G20 and other international fora that South Africa engages in. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, I would like to conclude by wishing you a very engaging symposium and a successful ordinary meeting of African governors. I trust that your deliberations will result in a fruitful exchange of ideas that will culminate in the development of policies that will assist in making meaningful inroads in furthering the development agenda on the continent. I trust that you will also have the opportunity to visit some other parts of our beautiful country, as our governor invited you to do so. We believe South Africa is one of the beautiful country to be seen, to be appreciated, to do business in. And we are ready for any business. The environment is very friendly. Your Excellency, it is now my pleasure to officially declare this symposium of the governors of Association of the African Central Banks opened. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I visited a pharmaceutical factory some time ago, and when I left, they gave me samples. So you have come to the central bank, and we produce money. So some samples for you.
Continue with our normal programming here on Newsroom. Now, we've course, our top story this morning, the South African Democratic Teachers Union is deeply concerned about the increase in violence across schools, not just in the Western Cape, but nationwide. SADTU has announced plans to stage a series of pickets at schools in the coming days. The Teachers Union says the impact of violence at schools in several areas, including places like Manenberg, Bonteheuwel and Hanover Park, is a major concern. Now, to talk to us about this, we are joined by SADTU's Western Cape Deputy Secretary, Sibongile Kwazi. A very good morning to you, Sibongile. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners.
Sibongile, before we talk about violence in general in schools in the Western Cape, I want to take you to this incident that's happened overnight or yesterday at a school in Mpumalanga where a 30-year-old female teacher was allegedly gunned down by her husband in front of learners and staff. She died of her injuries and the husband took his life later in the day. How do you as SADTU view this incident?
Yeah, we think that it's a very unfortunate incident, but it highlights the plight of teachers when they are at work, because one would assume that when a person is at their workplace, then their safety is guaranteed. But yesterday's incident shows clearly that it's not the case for teachers.
Tell us about the safety at schools. We always hear incidents and we see lots of weapons. We see students fighting with each other with weapons. We see gangs on schools. How do we overcome this challenge of safety at schools?
This is very complicated because in our assessment as SADTU, some of the challenges we encounter with violence at schools are actually circumstances of the community where the school is situated. Violence in the community spills over into the school, and the schools find themselves in that situation which is out of their control.
Now, Sibongile, you guys are planning a series of marches in the Western Cape because the situation is critical at schools down there. Just give us a quick idea. What are you planning with these marches and how are they going to play out over the next few days and weeks?
Okay, our first step was to educate learners about how to resolve conflict because we think that one of the major causes of violence is the lack of skills on how to deal with conflict. So one of our first steps was to ask our teachers sometime in April to host lessons on how to deal with conflict management by learners. Then we've been having pickets in all schools, and this week we're supposed to have prayer meetings in all the schools involving the community because we feel that enough is enough for now. We can't deal further with this issue of the scourge of violence at our schools. Only this morning, we received news that at one of the schools in Hanover Park, Crystal High School, one of their learners also died through such incidents of violence, which means that for this morning at that school, no teaching could take place because the briefing had to be done. Learning and teaching cannot happen in a violent situation. So as SADTU, yes.
So you talk about the levels of violence, but just give us an idea. What kind of violence are we seeing in the schools, especially in the Western Cape? Because a lot of it is gang-related and spills out of the community. So lots of weapons and the like on the schools. You talk about a young man being killed. How rife is this kind of gang violence and general violence that we're seeing at the schools in the Western Cape?
As SADTU and other unions, we participate in a safety at schools task team in the province. Some of the stats that we received recently on gang violence, there were 171 cases of gang-related violence that were reported from January to June this year, 171 cases.
So that's almost one every day.
It would seem so. And then crime, about 553 cases of repeated cases. Trauma, 67 cases. Abuse, 350 cases. And crime or assault that was in school premises, it was 226 cases. That is just for this year from January to June.
6 months.
That doesn't include, yes, that doesn't include all the incidents that happened after June this year. And we are aware that there are many of such incidents that already occurred after June.
It seems as if there are multiple cases every single day at schools in the Western Cape alone, and we can take that elsewhere in the country because the picture is not much different. But I want to ask you about the safety of your members, the teachers. Teachers are under fire. How do teachers protect themselves from this kind of thing, and how do teachers continue with their work in this environment?
Yeah, teachers are really in a catch-21 situation because besides their duties to teach at school, they are also charged with the safety of the learners under their charge. For instance, we became aware that in one school, a teacher was charged for not being able to protect the learners in his class when thugs came into the class to attack the learner. So the teachers themselves, who are in a vulnerable situation, have to see to the safety of their charges in the classroom. Again, teachers on a daily basis have to leave their comfort zone to go into those gang-infested areas, which means that their safety is compromised on their way to school and while they are at school. Because some of these gangs, they like to use the time just before school to attack each other and just after school, which means that teachers find themselves in the firing line. One of our members recently from Bontierville Secondary School, for instance, was in the unfortunate incident where she was just missed by a bullet while she was in class. And unfortunately, one of the learners was grazed by the bullet on her thigh, which means that while a teacher is busy teaching, they are not safe. They cannot feel safe. We understand. We have several meetings with the department on the issue because one of our concerns is the fencing of the schools. Some of the schools, the fences are dilapidated or they are not in a condition where they can deter the criminal element from entering the school. Another thing is school management have to concern themselves about access of unwanted people into the school premises, which means that although this is not one of the core responsibilities of teachers to be looking at the aspect of safety, now it is incorporated into their duties because on a daily basis, a school principal must ensure that the learners and the teachers at their schools are safe. This means that teachers are teaching traumatized learners, which in itself adds more trauma to the teachers because you cannot have a disciplined class if learners are learning in such an environment. The implications are that the learners who come from these areas themselves are traumatized and they add to the trauma of the teachers. And so much that many teachers are experiencing burnout because of that. It's traumatic to be at school in some of our areas.
Yeah, this is very concerning. Sibongile, we've run out of time, unfortunately. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you, it seems as if the gang members are becoming younger and younger. 13, 14, 15-year-olds are now gang members with weapons in schools. Is that right?
Yes, it's true. And unfortunately, some of the learners at school are part of those gangs, which means that they will take the tendencies from the community right into the schoolyard.
Thank you very much. It's very concerning what is happening in some of our schools here in South Africa. The levels of violence are simply unacceptable. And we ask you the question today, why have our schools becoming war zones? That's the question that we are asking to you on our screen today. Why have our schools become like war zones? Is what we put to you. And let's have a look at what you are putting to us. What are you telling us? These are some of your tweets. Zandile Ngasamyeki says to me, Newsroom children are the reflection of the world around them. Look at the four spheres of governments as they stand now. It is not surprising. Sipom Tambu says, blame should be shifted to principals and the education minister because they are the ones who must provide protection in schools. Jamila van der Scape says, children of all ages are exposed to a lot of violence, where it is on TV or at home. They are not protected from this harsh behavior. Those are some of your tweets. Keep tweeting us here on the Newsroom Show. We'll put it up as it comes in. Your views really matter. We're dealing with violence in schools today. After the break, we'll speak to an expert about, well, how do we remedy or even turn around this situation? Don't miss that interview.
What guides us? Is it something you can touch, hear, feel, or see? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
We make sure to be where news is happening,
both locally and globally. For the latest business news, stay with us.
From South Africa to the world, we've got all your latest sporting news.
Don't miss our weather updates at every hour. Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Hello again, everybody. Yes, we're dealing with the issue of violence in South African schools. It's reached epidemic proportions. Now, a study by the Centre for Justice and Crime Prevention shows that 15.3% of children at primary and secondary schools have experienced some form of violence while at schools, most commonly threats of violence, assaults, and even robbery. Now, we are joined by Patrick Burton from the Centre for Justice and Crime Prevention to find out how rife violence really is in our schools. A very good morning to you, Patrick. Thanks for being with us.
Morning, and thanks for the invitation.
Patrick, 15.3% sounds a little bit low, because I spoke to SADTU a little bit earlier, and they pointed out to multiple instances daily have been reported in the first 6 months of the year. Is it that more and more children are exposed to violent incidents?
I think it absolutely is. That 15.3% now is data that comes out of our 2013 study, 2012-2013 study, which was the last national school violence study. We have more recent data that was collected in 2015-2016 in the Optimus Foundation study that focused primarily on sexual violence, not just in schools but in homes. And there, the figures are significantly higher. I mean, we see rates of around 33% of learners who've experienced specifically sexual violence in schools. You know, we do have a huge amount of variation between provinces, between the types of violence that children experience. But it definitely, you know, I don't think anybody would question the fact that it is a daily experience for learners at schools.
Gang violence in the Western Cape seems to have reached epic proportions in schools and in the community surrounding those schools. How do we overcome these challenges? Because you can't build fences high enough. You can't put armed security guards at schools, surely, can't you?
Well, you can, but that really isn't going to solve the problem. You know, even in schools that are located within gang-ridden communities, you do see violence that comes in from the communities, and I think Sibongili's point earlier that that schools reflect what's happening in the community around them is absolutely right. But what the data tends to show as well is that most of the violence, even in those schools, is still committed by people, by peers and learners that are located within the same schools. So, you know, the one aspect of it is protecting what's happening or protecting learners in schools from what's happening outside. But the other aspect is looking at how do we keep the school environment safe? How do we make sure that learners are safe within the schools from each other as well? Most violence still happens in the classrooms or in the corridors around schools. And so it really, you know, we always say that we need an integrated approach, and nice term that rolls off the tongues, but, you know, we really need education, the police services, social development, local government to play their role in making schools safe. It isn't a one departmental responsibility. But ultimately, each of those departments and actors has to step up. You know, I can think of a number of cases where we've seen violence in schools that haven't been reported or it hasn't been dealt with by principals, by school officials as well, or where cases are reported to the police and the police don't act. And so we need to make sure that each department, each stakeholder plays a role and is held accountable for what happens.
We've got an incident now in the last 24 hours in Bushbuck Ridge and in Mpumalanga where a 30-year-old female teacher was gunned down by her husband in front of learners, grade 2s, and staff members at the school. How do you view this kind of incident, and how should we read this kind of thing as a society?
Yeah. It's horrendous. I mean, you know, it's horrific. We know these cases happen, but we need to think very carefully about the impact that it has on everybody that viewed that incident. We know that there's significant data from a range of studies, both within South Africa and internationally, that show the impact that just being exposed to violence as a child has on your developmental outcomes, your educational outcomes, your health, your psychosocial outcomes. And so just viewing one incident like that as a child is going to have huge significance in terms of your growth path and trajectories, and the sort of support that's required for every one of those children is absolutely huge. And you know, often we don't see that sort of support provided to children. But obviously it has impact on the educators themselves. I think the violence that educators are exposed to and themselves experience, both at the hands of learners and children and of other adults, is often an area that is not adequately addressed or considered. We tend to focus very much just on the violence against learners, rather than looking at the violence that educators also have to experience on a daily basis in schools and at home.
You talk about the educators there, and the educators are going to take to the streets. They're going to be marching, and a series of marches to try and shift the focus onto what is happening to them and what's happening in the schools. How do you think this kind of thing will help? Are there ears that would listen to these kinds of concerns?
I think there are ears. I think that it's something that you know, people within government and various departments are aware of. I don't think it's where the focus shifts or sits primarily. But I think that there has to be the recognition within government that teachers that are traumatized and teachers that are scared to be in the classroom simply can't function effectively. Just as any adult who's experienced direct victimization, who's been assaulted, who's been sexually assaulted, is going to be scared, is going to be affected, their work's going to be affected. That's what teachers are experiencing. And I think there is increasing recognition. I don't think it should take away from the fact that we need to make sure that schools are safe for learners and for children. But I do think that there is a willingness to hear that. At the same time, the response is how that gets managed, and the response is very important as well, because what we don't want is we don't want teachers to say, well, this isn't about how we teach, how we treat the children in the classroom. This is all about us. And I think, what we often see is that classrooms where corporal punishment, for example, is tolerated or condoned or utilized, or classrooms where bullying is tacitly condoned by educators, tend to breed much more serious acts of violence as well, and violence escalates. And so all these different forms and types of violence that are experienced by the school entity all feed into each other, and they really just serve to escalate the levels and the severity of violence that's experienced.
And in conclusion, Patrick, the role of parents cannot be understated in dealing with violence, not just at schools, but in our society. Our parents, are they losing the plot?
I don't think they're losing the plot. I think there are a lot of pressures and stresses on parents. I think many parents are not sure how to deal with violence. I think they don't necessarily feel they have the skills or are equipped to. I mean, without a doubt, I think there's enough evidence, there is enough evidence to show that if you intervene at an early age, if you provide support to parents, it is one of the strongest protective factors for violence against and within childhood. And I think that parents are often feeling overwhelmed, inundated, and don't really know how to respond. And I think that this is also where we need to look at the role of parenting programs, the support that government, that NGOs, civil society can play in supporting parents in how to parent positive parenting. How do you work in a positive way with children?
Patrick, thank you very much for coming in today and giving us your considered views about something that's very concerning for all South Africans, especially parents. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
That was Patrick Burton from the Centre for Justice and Crime Prevention, talking to us about the levels of violence in schools here in South Africa and how we should be coming to terms with it. The picture certainly looks quite bleak. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, Newsroom will have a complete sports update with Kendall Makamate.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Well, a very good morning and welcome to AM News Live at 10:00 hours across all Central Africa regions.
A fitting send-off for a revolutionary giant, a life dedicated in service of the people.
The result means that the Swallows are out of the ABC Municipal League and drop to the amateur fourth tier of South African football, the SAB League.
Tune in on AM News every Saturday and Sunday from 10 hours.
Welcome back. We're not going to sport. We're going to do a very interesting book. You're watching the Newsroom show, and Women's Month was created to commemorate the greatness of South Africa's women and the struggles they fought through during the process of freedom. But not all the women who are influencers in our society made a difference in the political space, from South African activists, rebels, artists, and the likes of Thuli Madonsela, the first black African woman to receive a doctorate in experimental physics. Buyisiwe Zondezi, and even sports stars like Caster Semenya have all overcome great difficulty, risen above the criticism, and shine a light for others to do exactly the same, many leaving a wonderful legacy. You can now read and learn about all these great females in the book, The A to Z of Amazing South African Women. Now, joining us from our studios is one of the authors of the book, A to Z of Amazing South African Women, Amber Nicholson. A very good morning to you, Amber. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Amber, why did you and the co-authors decide to create this book of iconic women?
Well, it actually came about as a dare from a friend. I had seen an American version of the book called An A to Z of Rad American Woman, and I'd said something like, there should be a South African version. And a very clever friend of mine said, well, maybe you should think about doing something about it. And that's actually how the idea came to be. And it's really about a celebration of the South African woman as we know them to be, which is courageous and compassionate and pretty amazing.
Is South Africa a place for independent, free-thinking, wonderful, amazing women still?
I think that, you know, this book at its heart was, it was aimed to be, you know, a colourful, fun, quite a light-hearted look that was suitable for a 13-year-old to learn about the amazing woman who preceded her. And I think that the way it's been received actually points to the fact that we don't have enough of these kinds of stories, and yet that the women in South Africa are indeed all of those things and much more when you look at the history that they've often had to overcome.
Now, on screen, we've got these wonderful short biographies compiled instead of lengthy historical context stories. Why did you go this route?
So it was very important for us to make sure that this wasn't anything that was, you know, boring or staid. We really wanted it to be engaging, and we felt that the best way to do that was to make sure that the biographies themselves were really accessible and that they were accompanied by colourful images and illustrations of women who are doing things. They're not just being, but actually acting. So, you know, there's illustrations of people who are singing and marching and, yeah.
It must have been very difficult to pick 26 women and then profile them. How did you go that process? It must have driven you nuts.
Absolutely. I always say that it's a really difficult but a wonderful problem to have, and there were thousands of women that we looked at and that we all felt really deserved the title of Amazing South African Woman. And we wanted to make sure that there was a good mix of women, and that's what we strove to do, to ensure that they were both contemporary and historical and everything from scientists to sports people. Beyond that, we also really wanted to make sure that this is a book of women who didn't know their place. You know, these are the women who didn't sit down and didn't shut up, and we wanted to celebrate that fact.
Why is it so important now, one would think more than ever, to educate the nation and to tell our young children about the strong females and the strong leaders we've had in this country, or still have even?
Well, as a writer, of course, I really believe that empathy is often based on imagination. And once we know each other's stories, we can empathize further. And I think in a country like South Africa, where women and girls are often, you know, suffer under huge structural inequalities, you know, in a country where, you know, it has a fifth higher average of femicide than globally, I think the more stories of strong women we feature, the better.
Now, we talk about female influences in this book. What's the difference between female influences and male influences and the influence that they then have on society?
I think that when it comes to showcasing women of this nature, I think what's really important is to show a variety. I think too often in the past, women historically have been shown in very stereotypical ways, and we were really at pains to ensure that we showed a really wide range of human experience that these women embody, and that's why we have everything from scientists to sports people and activists and artists, and, you know, even perhaps more unconventional international choices like Glenda Kemp, you know, who show a certain irreverence, and that women can be all different kinds of things.
And just quickly before you go, tell us where can I go and buy this book for my 10-year-old daughter?
So you should be able to find it at any good bookstore anywhere around the country. It should be on the shelves.
Amber, great to talk to you today. It's a fantastic book. I'm certainly going to get my daughter a copy. She's already very lippy. She needs role models.
That's great to hear.
Fantastic. Thanks for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
That's the one of the authors of this incredible book, The A to Z of Amazing South African Women. We're in the middle of Women's Month, and we are suffering some issues throughout this month with regards to how we treat our women. But that's where we leave it for now. Let's now talk about what's next. The SADC annual Heads of State and Government meeting is taking place in Pretoria here in South Africa. Now, the meeting will, among other issues, look at the current political climate here in the region that is Southern Africa. Let's go there live.
Work has commenced and progress will be reported. Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, while all these efforts to improve our organization are ongoing, it is important to ensure that the Secretariat as the institution tasked with the responsibility to coordinate the work of the SADC region is strengthened in order to be efficient and effective. More important than just coordinating will be the need to strengthen collaboration with the SADC member states through the monitoring and evaluation system. The strengthening of the SADC national committees will always take center stage in the implementation of the SADC regional integration agenda, simply because implementation takes place at the member states level. The existence of the committee and its subcommittees is therefore key in the integration agenda. I therefore urge your honorable ministers to put more efforts in strengthening or establishing the SADC national committees. The advantage will be that not only will it promote stakeholder involved, especially the private sector, it will also ensure alignment and integration of the RISDP and the SIPO with the national plans. So as we move closer to the end of the RISDP plan period, we should tie all the loose ends and work harder in order to ensure its successful implementation and achieve the goals we set for ourselves in the period 2015-2020. Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my address, please allow me to thank the SADC Committee of Senior Officials, chaired by Mr. Bertram Stewart, the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development in the Kingdom of Swaziland, for their hard work in ensuring that the deliberations and decision-making by the SADC Council of Ministers is made easier. This also includes the sterling coordination role played by the SADC Secretariat under the good leadership of the SADC Executive Secretary, Dr. Stekomena Lawrence Tax. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my singular honor and pleasure to hand over the baton to the Honorable Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Maite Ngwana Mashabane, and the incoming chairperson of the SADC Council of Ministers. Minister, I have the pleasure to invite you to take over. And thank you. God bless all.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hit them hard.
Thank you. Can I?
Why not? Hit it.
With you?
Ah. It's time. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, good luck.
We'll bang it again because so it doesn't fall.
Okay, Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Your Excellency and outgoing chairperson of the Council of Ministers for SADC, His Royal Highness Prince, let me pronounce your name correctly. Sihlangu Simpi Dlamini. Sihlangu Simpi Dlamini, it means the shoe that you put on when you are ready to fight against poverty, unemployment, inequality, and human abuse. That's what I heard from His Royal Highness. I wanted a loose translation of his name, but he did not ask what Maite meant. We will do it during due time, tea time. Esteemed and honorable ministers, amongst us, we are honored by the Honorable Her Excellency Deputy Prime Minister of Namibia and our big sister Nandine Ndaitwah, SADC Executive Secretary Dr. Stagomina Lawrence Tex. This work would be much, much difficult if it did not have this hand. Deputy Executive Secretaries, heads of senior officials delegations who have been hard at work for the past 4 days or more, SADC Secretariat officials, ladies and gentlemen, Malibongwe. Malibongwe simply means let the name of the women be praised, because in South Africa, this is the Women's Month, as His Royal Highness had said. When I say Malibongwe, you say igama lamakhosikazi. Malibongwe. It is with great honor and privilege that I welcome all of you to the 37th SADC Council of Ministers. I'm especially pleased to welcome you to the Oliver Reginald Tambo building. I think half of our delegations have landed at O.R. Tambo Airport. You don't know what this stands for. This is the name of our foremost diplomat who would have turned 100 years this year if he was alive. And that's why South Africa is celebrating in every corner the centenary of Oliver Reginald Tambo, our father, who worked tirelessly for freedom, not only of South Africa, but of our continent, working hand in hand with his wife, Adelaide. That we must not forget. It's a very momentous occasion for us as we celebrate this centenary. We draw inspiration from his exemplary leadership and from the vision that accorded him the accolades of international statesmen and astute and consummate diplomat. Allow me to also take this opportunity to thank, on behalf of all the ministers, the outgoing chairperson of our council, His Royal Highness, Prince Sihlangu Sempi Dlamini, for his excellent stewardship of the council. Siyabonga Baba. We are also comforted by the words of wisdom you shared with us, that every woman next to you is extremely safe. It's very, very safe and empowered. So, because he's in the room, let's all say we are empowered and we are safe. As we may be aware, 2017 also symbolizes an important year for our organization, SADC, which celebrates the 25th year since its inception. This Silver Jubilee celebration accords us an opportunity to reflect on how far we have come in fostering pragmatism and cohesion in our region. We used to be referred to during apartheid the frontline states. You had made it easier for freedom fighters from these shores to pass through your revered governments and countries. Sibonga kakhulu. For South Africa, August is Women's Month, as I said earlier on. Every year, during this time of the year, we remember the sacrifices and contribution of women in the struggle for a democratic, non-sexist, free nation. 20,000 women with no Twitter, with no fax machine, with no niceties that you guys have today, marched to the women building from all corners of the country. So the 9th of August was not just a date that we dreamt of. It is because women in action got together in this country and faced stradom. By fate, may his soul rest in peace. They say he passed on 2 weeks later because he's never seen this number of women. In 1956, marching to the Union Building in South Africa. So let's leave the rest to history. So that's where this Women's Month comes from. It is no longer ours, but it is for those who also sacrifice life and limb throughout our region, our continent, and the world. As incoming chair of the Council of Ministers, it is pertinent that I also highlight the importance of the SADC integration agenda for South Africa and for our neighborhoods. We all remain collectively seized with the responsibility of improving lives of our people for the better. As a woman, I dislike hearing people saying they want to alleviate poverty. I want to hear all of us saying we want to eradicate poverty. Because I know that poverty bears a feminine face. For those who don't know, who hear about it, to read about it, they want to alleviate it. For those of us who live it, we want to eradicate it. I think all of us in this hall work for eradication, total eradication of poverty, in line with the commitment we've made in SADC, we've made at the AU, we've made at the United Nations, we've made through the MDGs, the SDGs, and the Agenda Africa 2063. Our journey towards regional integration is critical. Also, that we also recognize the relationship and the interconnectedness of our regional priorities and agreed aspirations of the African Union Agenda 2063. Our objectives in SADC are informed by the SADC Common Agenda, which in essence comprises of our agreed blueprints, such as the Indicative Strategic Development Plan 2015-2020, the Regional Industrialization Strategy and Roadmap, the Strategic Indicative Plan of the Organ 2, and the Regional Infrastructure Development Master Plan. Guided by our identified priorities, as well as the leadership demonstrated by all our previous chairs, South Africa has thought it wise that this 37th Ordinary Summit of Heads of States for SADC should have the theme partnering with the private sector in developing industry and regional value chains. The theme picks up on the already identified importance of industrialization for the prosperity of the region and seeks to strengthen the region's capacity to realize industrialization and radical economic transformation through partnership with the private sector. It's not just fashionable, it's the right thing to do. Because ours, it's a minerally endowed continent and region, youthful population that's educated, that needs requisite skills to take their future in their own hands. As such, our vision for this year is to provide policy direction and an enabling environment for a program of work that prioritizes the preparations for high-impact cross-border projects that are pragmatic, enhance skills, create jobs. We shouldn't train our children to become good job seekers, but that they create jobs themselves and boost regional trade and high-value goods. As regional leaders, we carry a burden of responsibility to substantially improve the quality of life for the people of our region and to realize sustainable economic development. To this end, we continue to be found to be wanting and to have not done as much as we should. We live, Your Excellencies, in one of the world's richest continents, if not region, with the poorest people. This needs to stop somewhere. We are tired of going around with a begging bowl when we have so much for us, from land to all that which you know. Further to this, we must, as member states, support the SADC Secretariat to deliver on its annual program and strengthen on the Secretariat's institutional capacity and effectiveness. Excellencies, we undoubtedly have an extensive agenda ahead of us. Let us accord the work before us the requisite attention and appropriate and necessary direction on the way forward. We welcome you once more to your second home. I've been reassured from last night that you are not only feeling at home, you are at home. And I trust that you will find the arrangements put at your disposal conducive to successful deliberations and to your personal comfort, but also remembering that outside people are yearning for true freedom. They want to become their own liberators, and we have the wherewithal. This fourth global industrialization should not zoom past us like others did, with us watching. And for us telling the world, oh, we are very rich, but you please help, we have very poor people here. With these few words, I want to say once again, Excellencies, I thank you for your attention. Merci beaucoup. Muito obrigado. Baya danki, siyabonga kakhulu, realebura. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, and congratulations on your new role as the new SADC Chair of the Council of Ministers. Distinguished delegates, this comes to the end of our opening ceremony, and at this point in time, I will invite the Honorable Ministers and the High Table for a family photograph outside. We will start with the High Table going down, and my colleagues from the PRU will lead them to the area for the photo session, and they will be followed by the Honorable Ministers. The rest, let's just remain in the room for a short while, and then we will be invited to go for tea and join the Honorable Ministers. Thank you.
Annual Heads of State meeting here. Now, of course, news just in, and we need to get this to the story. The South African Reserve Bank has won its application to have the Public Protector's remedial action to change its constitutional mandate set aside. The judgment was delivered in the North Gauteng High Court by Justice Cynthia Pretorius, following the SARB's application on August the 1st. The judge said that the obligation placed on the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, as well as the South African Reserve Bank, to submit an action plan is also set aside. Mqwebane has been ordered to pay the cost for the application, including the filing of her answering affidavit. Mqwebane has ordered the bank's mandate to be changed to ensure the socio-economic well-being of citizens and to achieve socio-economic transformation. Let's go back now to SADC and see what is transpiring there, where Peter will wrap for us.
Okay, so we're just seen the wrapping up of the opening ceremony of the SADC Council of Ministers, and the job today really was just to introduce the new chairperson of the SADC Council of Ministers. Swaziland had been holding the championship for the last year, and we heard from His Royal Highness Prince Tlangustempi Dlamini, who's the Minister of Economic Planning and Development in Swaziland, handing over to our own Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Maite Nkwana Mashabane. The outgoing SADC chair, Council of Ministers chair, basically was just saying, look, you know, the battle continues to make sure that the people of SADC continue to grow out of poverty. The eradication of poverty remains a key resolution. And also, I think this is a theme that will come through quite strongly and coincides with Women's Month here in South Africa. The Prince also spoke about the importance and said that it's going to be a good thing to have a woman taking over as chair of the Council of Ministers for the year ahead. But he said that there were a number of issues that needed to be followed up on, such as the retreat that the SADC had about energy and the implementation of industrialization policies. And Maite Nkwana Mashabane, the minister, then was welcomed. She was given the gavel, and which she hit at the beginning, and has taken over. She's now the chairperson of the SADC Council of Ministers for the year ahead. And she spoke again also about the responsibility for SADC to make sure that we continue to improve the lives of the people for the better. She said that we need to move away from the idea of alleviating poverty and moving towards the eradication of poverty. She says that alleviation is something that we should put behind us and make sure that everybody gets out of poverty. And she says that the journey towards regional integration is a critical one, bearing in mind the various initiatives on the continent, including the AU Agenda 2063. The SADC has a number of priorities that are already in play, and guided by those, the summit theme talks about partnering with the private sector in developing the continent, the region. She talked about radical economic transformation in partnership with the private sector. She says that this is a real thing that we need to push through, and that policy direction will be very, very important in the year ahead, creating an enabling environment for us to prosper. The enhancement of skills, also very, very critical in the idea or the hope of industrialization in the region. She talked about the global industrialization story that's taking place in the world, and that SADC shouldn't be left behind as this is taking place. She says we live in a rich continent but with poor people. And so one of the things that are going to be important is to find regional funding models that are more sustainable than the setup that we have at the moment, where we are dependent on investment from beyond our continent. So it's officially open. The SADC Council of Ministers, they'll be meeting and deliberating and setting the agenda, which a lot of the heads of states will essentially just pick up on after the hard work has been done by the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers pretty much oversees the functioning and the development of the Southern African Development Community, ensuring that policies are properly implemented. And this consists of ministers from the member states, usually from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Economic Planning and Finance as well. They nominate a minister to sit, and this is what we've seen. So at the moment, what's happening is that they've all gone outside. They're having a group photograph taken at the beginning of this process, and after that, they're going to start in a closed session the real work and the hard work of what the Council of Ministers do. There are 27 protocols that SADC oversees, and these will help guide some of those discussions as they tweak them, develop them, and implement new policies around the theme of this particular summit. And we'll be covering as much of that as we can. We've got a very special station where I'm standing here. We'll be talking to key figures over the coming days, and we're hoping in a short while we might be able to get a representative from the organizers here just to tell us what is on the agenda for the Council of Ministers over the next 2 2 days. All right, and that's where we're going to leave it. So as I said, the SADC Council of Ministers is now officially open. We've just seen the official opening ceremony, and Maite Nkwana Mashabane is the new chairperson for the year ahead. We'll have more from you, from the SADC Summit number 37, which is taking place here in Pretoria in South Africa. In the meantime, let's go back to studio.
Thank you, Peter. That's an update there, and of course a wrap, and we'll probably get some more from the SADC Summit there. Meanwhile, you know that we are, of course, focusing on female abuse as well as, of course, violence in schools today. Now, officials from the Mpumalanga Department of Education are expected to visit the school in Bushbuck Ridge, where a 30-year-old female teacher was allegedly gunned down by her husband in front of learners and staff. Spokesperson for the department, Jasper Zwane, confirmed that Kate Chilowani, a teacher at SADTU Primary School, died after she was shot in full view of a class of grade 2 learners yesterday. The police also confirmed that her husband later shot himself at their home. Zwane says all the affected will receive counselling. Now, early on the story, our reporter Mweli Masilela spoke to Mpumalanga Police spokesperson Brigadier Leonard Tlati, as well as the spokesperson of Mpumalanga's Education Department, Jasper Zwane. But before we go that, let's just go back to Peter. He's got an update for us. Peter Ndoro.
Right, welcome back. We're here in Pretoria for the 37th SADC Summit, and it's all kicking off today with the Council of Ministers. And we've just seen a short while ago the opening ceremony and the handing over of the chairmanship to our own Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Maite Nkwana Mashabane. Let's talk to her now just about her message and her hopes and ambitions for the year ahead. Minister, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome. We've just seen the opening ceremony, and just tell us how important this gathering is, particularly the Council of Ministers.
Well, it is important that, one, this is the Women's Month in South Africa, August. Two, we are celebrating Oliver Reginald Tambo's year in South Africa. Three, SADC is no longer just a country comprised of frontline states. It's made of 15 members, and it's now a fully fledged developmental or regional bloc. And it's celebrating this 25th year in existence. We've got a plan. We want the plan to work for our people. We do not have time to waste. We had a special summit that in Zimbabwe, called by President Mugabe, to focus on industrialization. We went to Botswana, we looked at the hindrances. We went to Swaziland, and we said we now have identified how to improve our regional indicative strategic and development plan and framework. So this is the time to implement. We want to see more and more cross-border and integration program and projects, which will then allow us to contribute positively in the tripartite agreement of SADC, EAC, and COMESA, and to the Continental Free Trade Agreement for us to achieve the SADC we want, which is a good building block to build the Africa we want in terms of the aspirations of Agenda 2063.
Talk to us a little about the theme that you have set for this gathering.
Mm-hmm. Well, the theme focuses on value chains, that as we say we are industrializing, we need to be, and we think we are ready to streamline who does what for us to work indeed in terms of this partnership between government and business and straightening up the value chains and keeping on making our people their own liberators by creating jobs and not becoming job seekers. So the theme focuses on partnership between government and private sector, and also how we work together to improve and make our economy look better. We are not unaware of the global vagaries of challenges of slow growth, but we think we can make a positive contribution because we have the wherewithal. We've got a youthful population, we've got 60% of arable land, we've got trillions of dollars worth of available, extractable mineral resources that the world needs. So we need to beneficiate using appropriate skills. So our youth no longer, who are in majority, need to be educated, but they need also adequate skills to take advantage of these opportunities.
All right. Minister, you spoke about policy direction and creating an enabling environment. Talk to us a little bit about that and what the private sector can expect from this grouping as a collective so that they can assist and do the things that you're hoping they'll be able to do.
We are saying to the private sector, on your marks, get set. We are ready to play our part. That's why we want to waste no time, but to make sure that we empower them, we remove all the impediments that they think we still have to move forward with speed.
Is there the political will from all the member states on the same level to get this job done?
Majority of SADC member states, 15 in number, are well-meaning. They are ready to open up, except for a few that still have some security challenges, like Lesotho and the DRC. But we are working together with them, and we are receiving positive reports.
All right, so what are you going to be doing in the next couple of days?
In the next couple of days, the next coming 2 days, we will be having a ministerial part of the summit, preparing for the heads of states to say this is the agenda we think we should be following, which they have instructed to put up together. And then on the 18th and 19th, then we'll have a heads of states. But what I like is that we are theme-focused, and we know what our people said they wanted.
Okay, and what are you committing as the chairperson for the year ahead? When I have this conversation with you at the end of the year, when I look back, what will you say, what do you want to have been your biggest achievement?
Well, our biggest achievement is we are in all the plurilateral lists, and we are just not adding the numbers. We are adding impact. We always try and make sure that as South Africans, as Masupatsila of Oliver Tambo, we don't just speak for South Africa, but we positively project the image of a good Africa, and in terms of Agenda Africa 2063, of the Africa we want. Our youth are ready.
And final message, perhaps, to all our viewers across SADC, what participation should citizens be taking in projects such as this?
Well, we need not just depend on governments, but we need to work with governments, that the opportunities that open up for us, we take full advantage of. Where there are pitfalls, we do not take forever to point at them, so that we remove the unintended obstacles and focus on development that our people are yearning for. Because
we can.
All right, Minister, thank you very much indeed, and congratulations on your appointment as the new chairperson, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. All right, so that's the new chairperson of the SADC Council of Ministers, the Minister Maitenkwana Mashabane, and she was talking about the agenda going forward, that we've talked a lot. We now have to implement and get things done. So that's the new chairperson. It's my great pleasure now to introduce the outgoing chairperson, His Royal Highness Prince Slangu Sempi. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so it's been a year as the chairperson of the Council of Ministers. Looking back, what would you say you've been able to achieve?
Well, thank you so much. I think we have achieved a lot because we had some few programs that has been taking place during the course of the year. We had a workshop on the SADC we want, where the council met just to figure out what is it that is a big challenge in our region. For instance, we've been considered a continent that is rich in two forms, rich in minerals and also rich in poverty. So we were trying to figure out what is it that we can do just to cut the other part of the rich and then stay with the minerals. First of all, we are saying the minerals that we have, because most of the time have been exploited by the big countries, where they take raw materials, bringing it back to our region at a very, very high cost. So we are saying as a region, let's try and focus maybe in capacity building, capacitating all the people, especially the young ones, so that they can learn and then have a hands-on on what is going on. So when we go there, we're just taking the real product so that we can get all the maximum value of what we have as a region.
Your Royal Highness, do you think that citizens in the SADC grouping understand what SADC is and actually even feel like regional SADC citizens?
I hope people like yourselves are the ones sending the message to the SADC region. And of course, I hope they do understand, because the governments are supposed to be taking back all the information to the people so that we can hear from them. What I can say right now, some of the challenges we saw as affecting the region. We were saying government has been doing most of the things alone. But now we are saying, let us involve, let's get everybody. Let's get the private sector, let's get the business people, let's get everybody so that we have the SADC we want rather than the SADC that is imposed to the people. So I hope that message is taken around our region.
So one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is bigger integration, joining with COMESA, forming the Africa Trade Zone. And I'm just wondering what then will be the relevance of SADC as you get these bigger and bigger groupings coming into play?
Well, I think the relevance of SADC, first of all, the brotherhood and where we're coming from. We can't just crush it just because there is a new kid on the block. I think that solidarity is very, very important, because as SADC, we also have programs that are chained for SADC. But the other regional programs like the COMESA, that it involves so many countries. Whereas if you do it sometimes group small, and then you are able maybe to impose certain programs that will be suitable for your region.
All right. So the other thing is always implementation. I think these gatherings come up with great ideas, with great plans, great protocols. How do we move, as Minister Maitenkwana Mashabane was saying, into implementation and getting it done?
It's a mammoth task because as much as we can plan and plan and plan, but the major deal breaker is the resources. The resources are the one that is, are crippling us as the region, because we have the plans ready, but how do we take them forward is the issue of implementation. Because even if there's a way, if there's a will, but the resources, I think they are a stumbling block, which again is something that we are discussing as a region to figure out what is it that we can do. For instance, we are saying, let's try and look from within rather than maybe going to the people outside SADC, because usually such funding, they come with some strings attached. So we are saying as a region, as much as we want them, can we squeeze as much as we can from ourselves and then form this kind of like a regional SADC fund so that we can fund some of the projects and programs that are there. But again, the issue of resources, we just come from the financial problems a few years. So SADC is still trying to come back from those challenges. But again, God willing, we will find a way.
So when I look at regional blocks like ECOWAS, we've got an ECOWAS passport, and the movement of people within ECOWAS is so much easier than we're seeing here in SADC. When are we going to get to that point? Because that's the whole point of these kinds of groupings, is that we skill each other, but we move across each other's borders and we fully integrate our different countries.
Well, again, I think it is something, it's going on. We are discussing it amongst ourselves. It's just that some of these touches upon sovereignty. So we are discussing with different countries. Others are willing to partake, to part with some sovereignty. Others, they are still having some challenges there and there. Because as much as we want to develop as a nation, there are some security measures which comes with development. You find that sometimes, we thought this was going to be something good for the SADC, but now you find that people are coming with some drugs, people trafficking children and so forth. But we are busy working on it, and hopefully, and so soon, we will come up with a good solution so that we can have one passport and then trade freely amongst ourselves and with Africa.
What would you say is going to be the most important thing that you need to get done at this gathering of ministers?
I think it's to push the integration amongst ourselves very seriously. Most of the countries around the world, maybe I can give an example of maybe Europe. Europe is progressing because the integration is so severe, is so real. For instance, you find that maybe, I'll just give an example of an Airbus. You find that maybe England will be producing wheels, France will be producing wings, Belgium will be producing this and that. I think this is what we need again as SADC, to figure out what is it that is useful for us as a region. Let me give an example of the combis, because everybody is using combis, that's right there. So let's have some tires in Mozambique, some windows in Swaziland, engines in South Africa. Then we distribute the wealth as a region. And as much as we distribute the wealth, we're also helping ourselves because of migration. Because if this thing is not done fairly, you find that maybe the big countries, they will be having troubles because everybody is running towards greener pastures. But if we just try to distribute such programs, I think we can win it.
Your Excellency, Your Royal Highness, thank you very much indeed, and congratulations on the year that you've just finished, but I know that the work continues.
Thank you so much, and good luck to yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, so that was His Royal Highness Hlangusempu, who's the Minister of Economic Development in Swaziland, who's the outgoing chairperson of the Council of Ministers, again reiterating some of the things that Maite Nkwana Mashabane was speaking about a short while ago, integration, about getting things done. And yeah, there are definitely challenges, but they have to get into an arena now, or a time of implementation and getting the hard work done. So we'll see what comes out in the next 2 days as the Council of Ministers deliberate and prepare, I suppose, final statements, final positions that the heads of state will be able to engage with and maybe make decisions on come Friday, Saturday and Sunday. That's where we're going to leave it for the time being. We'll continue to monitor what's happening with the Council of Ministers. They're going into a closed session now, so we won't be privy to what they're discussing until a little bit later on, but that's where we'll leave it for the time being.
Thank you, Peter. That was Peter Ndoro coming to us live from Pretoria. Now, former AU Chair Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma says that the Deputy Higher Education Minister, Mduduzi Manana, should be removed from his position since he has admitted assaulting a woman 2 weeks ago. Manana allegedly assaulted 2 women at a Johannesburg nightclub. He's out on 5,000 rand bail. Dlamini-Zuma, who's attending the launch of an app to try and assist women who are victims of abuse, says that action should be taken against him. We talked to Dr. Dlamini-Zuma earlier.
I think it's bad when you have women being killed by their husbands, by their boyfriends, and being beaten up, and just, I think it's bad. And in any case, it shouldn't really happen. But we need to look at it, work on it almost collectively, all of us. Women have to be organized and work with men who do not agree with that. Because if we work alone, it will not work either. But we also need to deal with it even at home. We shouldn't allow it to happen at home and hope that when kids are older, they will stop. But we also need to, I think now, see how women can also assist to empower themselves so that they are not as vulnerable. Because, for instance, I was reading research that when people want to attack somebody in the street, they look at them, and if they look at them and feel that they are walking with confidence, and they back off and look at somebody who looks vulnerable and weak. So I think, but also we need to look at what's causing this. Why are men doing this? And look at it in a more holistic way. But of course, where it happens, it has to be reported, and the law must take its course. But we need to also look at why.
Yeah. Do you think, if we had a female president here in South Africa, and this is, it could be a great reality, do you think it'll help the situation? We live in a patriarchal society, and perhaps it is not top of the agenda. But do you think, as a female president, and you yourself are in the running for the presidency of the ANC, would this be one of your top priorities to tackle?
Well, I think it should really be something that society as a whole must look at. And of course, a female president cannot avoid looking at it and making it a priority. But I don't think one person can make a difference, because it's a societal issue. You have to mobilize society around it to succeed, not just one person, though that one person would be important.
Yeah. It certainly would be, and perhaps given a different circumstance, and I am going to put you on the spot a little bit. I mean, we've got a government minister, deputy minister, who is in a situation where...
Well, there you have it. That was Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma with that interview a little bit earlier. But right now, it's time to take a look at your sports news.
Thank you very much, Elvis. We break away from that to bring you a little bit of the sports that's been happening and also making headlines. Now, Springbok management is sweating over selections to the team to play against Argentina in South Africa's Rugby Championship opener this weekend. Prop forward Frans Malherbe has been ruled out with neck injury, along with captain Warren Whiteley, who missed the tournament after undergoing surgery for a groin injury. The other players in the squad have niggles but have shown good progress.
The Springboks have been training in Nelson Mandela Bay since last week. Scrum half Ross Cronje is still nursing a shoulder injury sustained during the final of the Super Rugby competition. Jaco Kriel is over his bout of flu, whilst Vice-Captain Siako Lisi has recovered from an ankle sprain. Fly half Henry Pollard continued with his on-field rehabilitation and will not be considered for this weekend. The Boks looked composed and energetic in training, determined to build on the momentum from the 3-0 whitewash over France in June. But the Argentinians are tough opponents, known for their attacking abilities and strong ball carriers.
We'd like to win every single test match, but we're all process-driven. We had a good week last week, got everybody back into the same boat, under the Springbok way. This week will be about a process, and now we'll focus on all the small little areas and hopefully put everything together on Saturday and deliver a Springbok performance of note.
It will be the 5th test hosted by the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium. The Boks have a good record here and have beaten Argentina, Scotland, the All Blacks and Ireland, while they drew against England. Zolani Moya, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Now, notwithstanding the criticism of its elections ahead of the World Athletics Championships, Athletics South Africa President Alex Kwasana has come out and said the Federation's next mission is to unseat the United States of America at the top of the medals table at a major event. Now, Team South Africa achieved its best performance ever at the IWF World Championships by finishing 3rd on the medals table in London. The haul of 6 medals was also South Africa's best performance ever at the event.
South Africa's golden girl, Caster Semenya, claimed South Africa's 6th and her 2nd medal at the championships last night. As usual, Semenya paced herself well, and despite a fast start by Burundi's Francine Lyonsaba and American A.G. Wilson, she kicked at just the right time to win a record equaling 3rd World 800 meters title. The 26-year-old's time of 1 minute 55.16 seconds was also her personal best and the fastest time in the world this year.
For me, I think it was just all about being patient enough so I can execute when the time is right. I have much respect for these girls. They've run fantastic. Obviously, initially for us, the main thing was to lead the race. And then, they were brave enough to lead. So then I was happy, I was like, oh, thank God they're leading.
Semenya's gold medal was her country's 3rd of the championships, elevating Team South Africa to 3rd on the medals table.
The team of young men and women that we sent to represent South Africa at the IWF Senior Championships in London performed better than any other team ever sent by South Africa in recent history. That put us on the 3rd spot out of 214 member countries. If you like statistics, in 2013, we came back with only 1 bronze medal in Moscow. In 2015, we came back with 3 medals, 1 gold and 2 bronze medals in Beijing.
But there was a big outcry leading up to this year's championships when ASA excluded some of the best performing athletes in the country from the final squad because of ASA's stringent qualification criteria.
We selected athletes and the athletes delivered, and we cannot be able to go back to the issue of selection criteria. We're talking now about the results that we've achieved based on the criteria. South Africa is ranked number 3. They've never in the past beaten Jamaica and Ethiopia and many other nations. The only struggle for us now and the hurdle is to get to the United States of America and Kenya and beat them.
South Africa's high-profile athletes will remain in Europe for the next couple of weeks to compete in various international meets. Sfiso Ramara, SABC News.
Now, Sebastian Coe, the head of the IAAF, made sure to warn athletes and the world that the IAAF is still going to make its submission to the Court of Arbitration for Sport on the science behind its decision to have told Caster Semenya and Indian sprinter Dutee Chand to medicate because of their high testosterone levels. They will be making the submission in a couple of weeks' time after having missed that deadline on the 27th of July. Here's Sebastian Coe.
We are returning to the Court of Arbitration in one form or another to make a submission, the submission that we were asked to give when the Court of Arbitration suspended the regulations 2 years ago, and our teams are currently working on that submission.
With all that said, it was an absolutely glorious World Championships in London. We're going to relive some of the moments that have made all South Africans and some Africans extremely proud to have come from this continent. Let's have a look.
What can he do in this second round? Here he comes again. Bang! Oh! Yep, that's a biggie. It really is. White flag this time. Looks down, impassive, but that is a massive jump. Well, gold and bronze for South Africa. What a wonderful championship in the long jump.
Kip Yegon is coming away to win the only title missing from her collection. Simpson takes the silver and Semenya out-dips Laura Muir.
Look at the afterburners. Wade van Niekerk's put his foot down in lane number 6. He's going to swing into the home straight, the world leader. The South Africans running well. Tebe of Botswana in lane number 9 running well. Gardner on a charge, but nobody can stop the world record holder. Unofficially 43.98 seconds.
Cleanly away in this huge final. What an opportunity. Sonny Brown is trying to close down on Webb outside him. Makwala coming through here with Guliev on his inside. And now Van Niekerk trying to come through. It's really tight. Richards coming. Guliev and Van Niekerk. It's so close. Guliev is very, very tight.
It's going to be an absolute tear-up. They know the 3 medalists, but in what order are they going to be? On the outside comes Caster Semenya. She was poised and she waited. Neon Saba's still fighting to hold on to the silver. She will. And RJ Wilson will pick up a bronze for the USA. Wow, 155.17. It's a lifetime best for the South African.
Fantastic, phenomenal stuff to be really proud of. It brings chills down my spine as I watch all those athletes garnering gold, bronze and silver for South Africa. Talking about South African athletes, Jordy Smith has moved to the top of the world surfing rankings. He's the new #1, despite falling in the semi-finals of the Billabong Pro Tahiti. Australian Julian Wilson won the event, the 7th of 11 stops on the World Surfing Tour. Now, Smith's passage to the semi-finals and his tie for 3rd place is his best ever finish in Tahiti. He lost to eventual winner Wilson in that heat, but the result was good enough to see him leap to the top of the Jeep leaderboard. He now heads to the Hurley Pro at Trestles, the California event in which he's the defending champion. He'll try to keep his lead in the standings, in which is less than 1,000 points ahead of Hawaii's John Florence. That's where we leave it. I will be back tomorrow with more of the same. It's Newsroom that you've been watching. The entire team will be here at 9 o'clock till midday. Thanks very much for having stayed with us and having joined us to watch Newsroom. Time for the weather now. Goodbye. This
have a funeral policy.
No matter the sacrifices you've made or the hours you've worked, you can't always say yes, even when you really want to. Avbob's Cashback Funeral Plan not only provides funeral insurance for your family, but also helps you to say yes to life's little extras more often. Because for every 5 claim-free years, you'll get an entire year's premiums based on your monthly premium value paid back in cash. Say yes to more of life's little extras. SMS cash to 41790 and we'll call you. Avbob, We're here for you.
SMS CASH to 41790 and AFBOB will contact you.
A top 5 rated horse racing event in the world, fashion is a highlight for those in attendance. All decked out in blue and white, the Lomorians Queen Plate is the premier event that kicked off everyone's social calendar.
That it was all part of my master plan to cast John Legend but deprive him of his normal instrument and give that one to Ryan.
The House of Truth is not just a name. It is a religion. It is a lifestyle. It is a conviction that drives us.
What really excites me is how people have kept it very simple and also played with the theme, and how each person has interpreted it in their own way.
To stay updated with all the current entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
We make sure to be where news is happening,
both locally and globally. For the latest business news, stay with us.
From South Africa to the world, we've got all your latest sporting news.
Don't miss our weather updates every hour. Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
China and Africa, despite constant changes in the international situation, have always stood shoulder to shoulder, working together and supporting each other. In the 1950s and 1960s, national liberation movements swept Africa. The Chinese people, who had recently gained their own liberation, offered the African people full support in their just struggle against Western hegemony and colonialism. In 1956, China and Egypt announced they were establishing diplomatic relations. This made Egypt the first country in Africa to establish formal ties with the newly founded People's Republic. At the end of 1963 and the beginning of 1964, Premier Zhou Enlai undertook a tour of Africa, visiting 10 African countries in 2 months. During his trip, he set out 5 principles on which bilateral relations between China and the African and Arab countries should be founded. He also referred to 8 principles based on which China would provide economic and technical aid to other countries. His visit to Africa is still fondly remembered there today. On October the 25th, 1971, at the 26th United Nations General Assembly, the motion to restore the legitimate rights of the People's Republic of China at the UN was passed with an overwhelming majority. The announcement was greeted with enthusiastic cheering by the delegates of many African countries. Chairman Mao Zedong said, "Our African brothers carried China to its legitimate seat in the United Nations." Subsequently, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, China has always spoken out to uphold justice for the countries of Africa. It has also defended the common interests of the African and developing countries. The African countries' support for China has not only been political. When China has been in need, their support has also been economic. In 2008, in the wake of the devastating Wenchuan earthquake, China received over $10 million in donations from Africa. The president of Equatorial Guinea even dispatched his foreign minister with €1 million to help the victims. This represented a donation of over €1 from every man, woman and child in Equatorial Guinea. In 2011, after the earthquake in Yushu in Qinghai province, the Republic of Congo gave €2 million to rebuild the China-Congo Friendship Primary School. And in 2015, Equatorial Guinea donated $4.9 million for building the China-Equatorial Guinea Friendship Primary School in Jinping County in Yunnan Province. Thanks to careful tending by several generations of national leaders, the tree of China-Africa friendship continues to flourish. It has withstood the trials of the changing world and taken deep root among the people. Today, this tree is growing stronger. In the 21st century, the world faces a new situation and new challenges. The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation was founded so that China and the countries of Africa could work and develop together. In November 2006, a China-Africa Cooperation Forum Summit was held in Beijing. The scope and level of mutual development would be expanded. The unity among the developing countries would be strengthened. South-South cooperation would be enhanced, and peace and development in the world would be promoted. The 16 years since the China-Africa Cooperation Forum was founded have been a period of significant achievement, when China and the countries of Africa have stepped up the comprehensive development of their relations. Between October 2000 and June 2016, senior Chinese leaders paid a total of 166 visits to Africa. The more frequent high-level exchanges and the deepening of mutual trust have created a powerful driving force for raising the level of China-Africa relations. Notably, China and the countries of Africa have closely cooperated to promote the reform of the international economic order and to implement the agenda for sustained development by the year 2030. They've also adopted a unified approach to dealing with problems such as climate change and to defending the interests of the developing countries.
A very good afternoon to you. You're with the Midday Report. I'm Frances Hurd. Let's take a look at what's making headlines this hour. The High Court sets aside the Public Protector's remedial action to change the Reserve Bank's mandate. SASSA, the Social Security Agency, tells Parliament that it will be ready to take over the payment of social grants by April next year. And a little later, police investigating Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe, for an alleged assault case involving a South African model. All right, the South African Reserve Bank has won its application to have the Public Protector's remedial action to change its constitutional mandate set aside. The judgment was delivered in the North Gauteng High Court by Justice Cynthia Pretorius, following the Reserve Bank's application on August the 1st. The Public Protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane, must pay costs for that application up to and including the filing of her answering affidavit. Mkhwebane ordered the bank's mandate to be changed to ensure the socio-economic well-being of citizens and to achieve a socio-economic transformation. But the bank contested this on several grounds, among these that it falls outside the public protector's powers and that the remedial action breached the separation of powers because it encroached on Parliament's exclusive domain. The Reserve Bank pointed out that the remedial action was irrational and the process was unfair. It says it was not given an opportunity to comment on the constitutional amendment. Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago previously said that the bank's primary objective is to protect the value of the currency in the interest of balanced and sustainable growth. All right, let's get a reaction now. I'm joined on the line by COSATU spokesperson Sizwe Pamla. Sizwe, what is the Trade Union Federation's response?
Well, as COSATU, we have noted the ruling by the court, and of course we respect it. Look, we've made it very clear, this issue before, that the powers of the public protector, of course, they are subject to scrutiny by the court. The solution that it is not, the argument is that let us move away from believing that this current policy position is the only way of doing things. When we have talked about ensuring that there is redistribution of income and wealth to all South Africans, we are saying that, of course, we want this policy of inflation to be maintained, but not to the exclusion of other priorities of the economy. So we don't want to go into that debate because we have an appreciation of the role of inflation in repealing workers' wages. We deal with that every day. The current strike that we are currently seeing and that you will continue to see during the round of negotiations as a result of workers' wages being repealed by inflation. So we are the last people to argue that inflation is not important. But we also do not believe that that then has to be used to blackmail us to not having another conversation about expanding the mandate and making sure that we look at other priorities that can be achieved without really getting rid of inflation targets.
All right. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Sizwe Pamla from Trade Union Federation COSATU that supported the public protector's stance, but they are saying that they respect the right of the courts to uphold the current mandate of the Reserve Bank. And if you'll remember, the Reserve Bank took this matter to court, even though the public protector herself had backtracked, seemingly in recognition that perhaps she went too far in stepping on the Reserve Bank's mandate, but the Reserve Bank still wanted this to go to court to clarify that its current mandate is legally enforceable. Social Development Minister Batabile Dlamini was not in Parliament today to attend a standing committee on public accounts hearing on SASSA, the South African Social Security Agency. She was attending another function. SASSA's interim CEO, Pearl Bengu, appeared before Scopa for the first time since her appointment. She told the committee that the authority will be ready to take over the payment of social grants by April next year. Bengu said SASSA's executive committee had resolved to work with the Post Office regarding the payment of social grants and had received permission from the National Treasury for this deviation from its mandate. Now, members serving on Parliament's Communications Committee have agreed on shortlisting 36 candidates for the new SABC board. The committee was expected to start shortlisting today, but the chairperson, Humphrey Marikana, says they've not yet received the CVs of those who were nominated or who applied. More than 300 applications have been received for just 12 positions. Marikana said they want to finish the process before the term of the interim board expires at the end of September. Public Service Minister Faith Matambe is expected to face Parliament's Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests over reports that Matambe allegedly flouted procedure when hiring 27 support staff to work in her office. Matambe allegedly appointed relatives as drivers and deputy directors without following proper procedure. The Democratic Alliance says if the claims are true, the minister could have breached the Ministerial handbook, which states that a minister can appoint up to 10 individuals when establishing private offices. DA Deputy Chief Whip Mike Waters has said it shows that Matambe is back to her old tricks from the Communications Ministry. Matambe will also face the music over recent claims that she spent R500,000 to bring her family to Cape Town to watch her budget vote. Regional peace and security, trade as well as economic ties are expected to top the agenda as this week's Southern African Development Community Summit to be held in Pretoria. The 37th Ordinary Summit of SADC Heads of State and Government will be preceded by the Council of Ministers meeting, which will review progress made in implementing a number of policies and decisions. Well, for more on this, we cross to my colleague Peter Ndoro, who's in Pretoria. Peter, what are the issues for the SADC community right now?
Francis, thanks very much indeed. Yeah, it's all happening here in Pretoria. As we've been saying, this SADC Summit actually started on the 10th of August. It's been running for a while already, and it started with junior officials, and it's been escalating as the weeks and days have gone by, and will culminate with the heads of state gathering starting from Friday. Today is the beginning of the Council of Ministers, and in many ways they really are the ones that are the custodians of policy and make things happen. The heads of state come and sign things off, but the Council of Ministers is where all the action happens and the big decisions are made. And there are a number of issues which we'll discuss, but one person who's been watching and observing the growth of SADC in particular is Ambassador Ben Mpoko, very well known in South Africa because he's been an ambassador in this country for a good 16 years, and he joins us now. Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency, for joining us, and welcome to the program. You've seen a number of these SADC summits over the years, and I just want you to give me your impression of the progress that we've made, because I get a sense that we were much better at being frontline states. We were much better at being security oriented and making sure that Southern Africa is freed from colonial rule. But the journey since then has been much more difficult.
Yes, the road traveled so far has been, in terms of the liberation of the region, has been wonderful, because all 15 member countries live in the region which is free politically. But then we had to embark into the next challenge, which is the economic freedom, which means development, fight against poverty, fight against diseases and so forth. And that road is a bit more difficult only because we have traveled through periods of instability in the region. Development will never take place when you have instability. Secondly, we need to come together as a region and embark into those policies that will make us move forward, combat the unemployment. The 60% of the population of the region is under the age of 35 years, which means we have challenges to make sure the young people coming on stream, they find jobs, they find houses and so forth, they have adequate education. So we have reached a point to ask ourselves questions. Are we doing the right thing up to now? And the decisions that we make when we meet, are we implementing them? Do we have the adequate and instruments to implement the policies that are being taken here? We are meeting among politicians, among diplomats, heads of state. What is the youth? Are they here? When we make policies toward infrastructure, because we need the adequate infrastructure for the investment to take place, we need investments to create jobs and so forth and so on. But the people who implement those policies are the private sector. Are we including them into those discussions? We are talking about the women women or the SADC countries have a policy to promote the young ladies, the young girls, and the women. Our education system, are we educating the people that we need to embark into to help us develop? We also have the issue of brain drain. Most of our brains are still overseas. Are we inviting them to come and join us so we can ask them to help with the development issues? So there are those issues that we need to embark upon, because when we are liberation movements, we traveled all over the world, we brought the people together, we work together. So that's what the regional integration is all about, is trying to come together and face those issues as one, instead of each country trying to fight those issues.
So what is holding us back? It's quite clear you've articulated the challenges, you've articulated the problems, and I just wonder, how do we get from speaking about it to actually causing change? Because this isn't a new conversation that we're having.
Yes, you're right, but it takes leadership, but it takes especially commitment. We had to commit, and we had to police ourselves so that each country, when we go back, do we implement the decision that we made in Pretoria? If we don't, what is the penalty? There's no penalty. I don't want to call into a system policing each other, but I think we need to hold each other together, help each other, share experiences, and so forth and so on. And I think there is that kind of mechanism that is lacking today, that of bringing us together, holding us together so we can implement things together. We need to help each other. If someone is struggling, for instance, we say we're going to build infrastructure, but not everybody is the same level of development to invest adequately in infrastructure. So how can those who have the capacity help the ones that are lagging behind? So we need those kind of tools and mechanisms to pull each other together, just as we did with the liberation movement. When we have only to liberate South Africa, everybody got together. The South Africa needed to go to an exile, they found home everywhere. So we need that kind of spirit to embark into sustainable economic development.
So what are the political leaders engaged with if they're supposed to be showing the kind of will that's required to sign off these things and to get these things happening? Because we talk about regional development, but at the moment it seems like, you know, everyone's on their own and doing the best they can. They show up to the meetings and they go back and they carry on individually.
No, we have made a lot of progress. For instance, in the area of peace and stability, we have made a lot of progress. When my own country was going through turmoil and so forth, the SADC came together to help the DRC to find its feet. You saw what happened in Madagascar. SADC came together and brought about peace and stability in Madagascar. Most recently, Lesotho. SADC got together, and so we're working together in those areas.
This is what we did well traditionally as the frontline states. It's the economic stuff that we seem to struggle with.
Yes, we need to translate their spirit of cooperation or togetherness into the economic development. And I think during this summit, those are the kind of issues are going to be addressed. How do we move together? We have a program called the macroeconomic convergence, which means that we need to find complementarity with other economies. We need to develop tools that will attract investment into the region.
Ambassador, SADC has 27 protocols right now, which means we've talked and talked. We know what to do. We don't need to discuss anything further now. We just need to ask why, as leaders, are things not getting signed off and getting done?
Yeah, as I said, I think we need to bring in other actors outside the political structures. We need to bring in private sector to accompany us. We need to bring the youth so that we can listen to them. We need to bring more women so we can. That's what, and then I think we're embarking into that today to bring the private sector, the youth, and not only the African private sector, the international private sector.
I put it to you, you already know what the youth want, you already know what the women want. Again, it's down to those people who make decisions and make things happen, who are choosing not to get these things done. There are no mysteries left on the continent of what needs to be done. The mystery is getting it done.
Definitely, and to get it done, we need to not only listen to them, but we need to include them in the decision-making process. We need to include them in implementation strategies, so they are part of the implementation. But if we just listen to them and then we say we're going to implement this on your behalf, maybe that's not the way to go. It's important to bring them in.
All right, so, and I asked this question a little bit earlier to Minister Maite Mkwala Mashabane. I'm a citizen in Lubumbashi, in Kinshasa, I'm a citizen in Lusaka, I'm a citizen in Lilongwe, I'm a citizen in Harare, I'm a citizen in Johannesburg. And I'm going to ask you, what benefit is there for me that we have this thing called SADC?
No, I don't think everybody, it's important from the media viewpoint, from publicity viewpoint, for everybody to have heard about SADC. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is how is that citizen of Lilongwe, how is he going to be impacted by the decision made by SADC? It's the impact of our decision that needs to be felt. Even if they know that SADC exists, I don't think that's the most important thing. It's the impact.
So what impact is it having on citizens at the moment?
Where, for instance, peace and stability, that's a major impact. People who were going through turmoil, through the war, now they have peace. That's a positive impact. Now we're talking about promoting trade. That means people can move around. You can go from Lilongwe, come to Harare, come to Johannesburg to trade, for vacation, or his children to study. That's a positive impact. That the movement of goods and services and people within the region, which is happening. But you cannot do that if you have a peace and stability. So there are some impact being felt, but I agree with you, it's not enough. We need to do more of that.
All right, so what happens? We're having a lot of elections taking place, and people are feeling that the election processes are not always as transparent as they need to be, that the governments in charge are not behaving as they should, human rights abuses and so on and so forth. If we can't look to SADC member states to help us in these countries where these issues are playing out, where do citizens go?
No, SADC has helped. They have a very positive impact in my own country. They're positive, as I said, in Madagascar, in Lesotho, and so forth. SADC has even gone outside the region to help when they have a turmoil in Ivory Coast, when they were probably in Burundi, in Sudan. SADC countries have gone to help other countries as a nation. All I'm saying is that we need to do more of the same thing.
All right. Very finally and briefly, what would you like to come out of this 37th SADC summit?
Well, we are still embarking into the integration process. We still have challenges in terms of building the basic infrastructure, the telecommunication infrastructure, and so forth. We need to trade more among SADC, and those issues are going to be discussed during the course of this week, and I hope that we will come up with some answers that we can implement once we go back to our respective countries.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Ambassador, and we look forward perhaps to more chats as this summit unfolds. Thank you so much for your thoughts and insights today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so there you have it. That's the Dean of Ambassadors here in South Africa, the longest serving ambassador from the DRC here in this country, talking to us about critical issues of getting things done, implementing, and making sure that the right voices are at gatherings such as this. And this time, critically, the youth and women should have a greater voice in guiding the kinds of conversations that are taking place at SADC 37 taking place here in Pretoria. Francis?
Peter Ndoro live from Pretoria, and he'll continue with that event. We'll bring you hopefully some of those practical measures to come out of the SADC summit to deal with the issues for the Southern African region. Stay with us. We take a short break.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say. What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the words of our sacred texts? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back. ANC presidential hopeful Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma says Deputy Higher Education Minister Mduduzi Manana should be removed from his post. Manana allegedly assaulted 2 women at a Johannesburg nightclub. He's admitted to one of those. He is out on 5,000 Rand bail. Dlamini-Zuma says he's admitted to the attack. She spoke earlier to Morning Live's Leanne Mannis during the launch of an app to try and assist women who are victims of abuse.
I think in his case, it's different because he has even admitted. So, because normally you would say the law must take its course and so on, but he has admitted. So I think it's fair to act on it because we've seen, and he has said he has done it.
So you would wait in the same position for the law to take its course?
No, I'm saying you should act on it.